Right, I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, May 27th. First item on our agenda this evening is roll call.
Barraza. Here. Lancy.
Here.
Beck. Here. Malay. Malone.
Here.
Solfa.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Barron. Here. Lehman. Here. Lohman. Pieper. Fehrenbach.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Vogelsinger.
Ten out of 14. Okay. I did get a message from Tony and Sarah that they'll both probably be late. All right. Item number 2 is a reminder to please speak into the microphone. If you come up to use the mic at the podium, just make sure you can see the little green light come on and hear yourself. Oh, the record reflect Alderman Lohman is here. And then do we have any items to remove, add, or change tonight?
No.
Nothing? Okay. And do we have anybody from the public that has anything for an item not on the agenda this evening? Anybody here for that? Okay. And then we'll move right on to the consent agenda. Alderman Beck.
Yes, the consent agenda reads as follows. Resolution 2025-79-R and 2025-80-R, approving contract with Builders Paving LLC for 2025 street and sidewalk program and authorizing MFT with IDOT. Resolution 2025-81-R, authorizing the execution of a contract in the amount not to exceed $833,696 for the Batavia Interfaith Food Pantry and Clothes Closet remodeling project at 916 First Street with KWCC Construction, Inc. of Montgomery, Illinois. I move we approve the consent agenda as read.
Second. Motion by Beck, second by Malone. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries 10-0. Just a real quick thing, I want to make sure everybody knows that the contract for paving again is under budget. So I'm glad to see that and glad that we get all the amount of road done that we have there. Do we have any idea when the food pantry is going to be finished? When the target date for that?
It will be finished in September.
Okay.
That is
Great.
matches up with their lease on Verdant.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, then we'll move on to item 6, which is ordinance 2025-033, annexing properties South Verdant Road and Wagner Road. Scott?
Thank you. This is a continuing effort to annex the surrounded island areas in the around the city. This is the next area. We had sent out letters about a year ago, actually, to all these property owners. Since that time, we had voluntary petitions from 11 property owners. This is the section that is the northern end of what's left. This consists of 14 properties, which has 13 homes. We did not receive voluntary petitions from any of these property owners. So the process has been to then go ahead and publish a notice for the involuntary annexation and to annex the remaining surrounded properties. We do provide road maintenance on all these properties now, and we also, a couple of properties do have city utility services as well. So this is just another step in the process we've been doing for the last several years.
Again, none of the properties would be forced to do any change from what they are currently
Correct.
Until they need something replaced.
Correct. The utility services that they have can remain as is until such time that they either do a substantial improvement, like a major addition on, or their systems fail and it cannot be replaced. At that time, if we have utility services available, then they would be required to connect on. In many cases, because of the water and sewer, that's actually required by the county and not us. So the county would actually require them to connect on because we do have some utility services in that area now. So they will have to change their address. That's the downside of the annexation. So they go from the rural address to the city address, and that will happen immediately after annexation. Many people here, I don't know if there are.
Anybody on the council have any questions? Anybody contacted? Got any contact from any residents or anything?
Contact from Ward
Okay.
1, and this is what we've been doing. I mean,
Right.
this is usual
Going through
course.
all of these. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to address this tonight? Okay. I'll make the motion then that we recommend to council ordinance 2025-33, annexing properties of South Verdant Road and Wagner Road. Motion by Wolf, second by Solfa. Roll call, please.
Baraza. Lancy.
Aye.
Beck. Malay. Malone. Solfa.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Barron. Lehman. Lohman. Keeper. Fehrenbach. Anderson. Vogelsinger. That's 11.
Okay. Go to council with positive recommendation. Up next is item 7, resolution 2025-076, approving plat of dedication for a portion of Center Avenue. Drew, welcome.
Yes, so there's 2 related items on the agenda tonight, so I'll kind of tackle them both. But the first being the plat of dedication for a portion of Center Avenue, also known as Center Street. I'll try and keep using Center Street through the conversation tonight, but it was originally platted as Center Avenue. But essentially, the plat of dedication would dedicate 8 feet of the subject property for future right-of-way purposes, and they would provide about a 20 by 20 turnaround area, or at least designated on the plat for future use. There's basically 2 items being considered. The other item is the resolution 25077, which has the more substantive requests for variation from the subdivision requirements for construction. Essentially, the subdivision code requires certain requirements to be met for street improvements and other right-of-way improvements that the applicant, Michelle Lambert, is requesting relief from those items under the subdivision code. Subdivision variations are reviewed by the Plan Commission as part of the subdivision code process. So they did review this at their meeting on May 7th, where there was substantial discussion about the status of the parcels and how they were conveyed in the present situation now. The applicant, or excuse me, there were about 5 residents from the area, and one being the prospective purchaser of the property. Through the Plan Commission review, each of those speakers noted existing conditions within Center Street and expressed support for the variations, essentially where those would be keeping essentially things similar to the current status quo. A lot of the development in the area, or the last development of the area, happened in the 70s, so there really hasn't been any other changes since then. There was discussion about the staff recommendation. With the recommendations or the review of the potential steps that the commission could make a recommendation on, there was a recommendation of having kind of a modified turnaround. The Public Works staff did note that they would prefer to see no relief be granted, noting that essentially with subdivision or with development, those are standard requirements of development, and that they would provide the opportunity for things like such a proper turnaround, addressing ability to have locations to place snow, and have snow operations be effective, as well as just general access. The commission did essentially discuss those different recommendations and agreed essentially with what's before you in the resolution tonight, which would be requests for relief. One of the discussion points with the commission was sidewalk fee in lieu. They recognize that we have done that in a couple other locations in town where it may not be feasible or practical to put a sidewalk in place, but they did feel that it was appropriate to collect a fee in lieu so that those funds could be used to place sidewalks elsewhere in the community. So that they did include within their recommendation of approval to include a fee in lieu requirement. The Plan Commission did not review the plat. That's a dedication that does fall outside of their purview and is just within the council. So that is, that's why there's no recommendation on that. But overall, with a 4-to-1 vote, the Plan Commission did recommend approval of the modifications as included in Resolution 77R. The vote was split at 4-to-1, but it did include that fee in lieu for sidewalks language. So the recommendation from the Plan Commission was to recommend approval, and we are presenting it before you tonight. And I should say the applicant is here if there's any questions for them as well.
Have any questions? Yeah, I had to figure out where Center Street was. I don't think
I had
I've
to
ever heard
look
of
too.
it.
I had to look too.
Yeah. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot there, so. Kevin?
So, so the fee in lieu of a sidewalk, how do we calculate that? What's our method for figuring out to make sure we're not sort of giving people a cheap way out?
Sure. So within the subdivision code, for essentially there's a fee in lieu for sidewalks where they're kind of far away from anywhere anywhere else in terms of other sidewalks or bus routes or schools. So in those instances, and what we would do here would be essentially calculate an engineer's estimate for what the sidewalk cost would be for that run. There's typically Public Works Engineering can determine that value. In larger situations, it would probably be a situation or situations with the developer where they may provide an estimate that we review. This might be a situation where we would just provide that figure for them for what it would
So it'd be
cost.
sort of a dollar for dollar type.
Yes.
Whatever they might pay for it, we would collect. Okay.
Correct.
And then I think maybe I missed it. How are we resolving the turnaround issue then?
So the Plan Commission's recommendation was to not have what we called the modified turnaround in the Plan Commission packet. That was that option B, which kind of had about a short distance into Center Street, and then using that full 20 feet of that hammerhead that's shown on the dedication plat as basically kind of a modified or a turnaround space. So the Commission's recommendation did not include that. So the resolution before you tonight would be to not have that turnaround as part of the consideration. Obviously, the council can discuss if they would want to keep that or consider alternatives.
And it's typical for us to have that. Typically, we would require that turnaround space, and here they're asking for relief from that requirement. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. So what was proposed as the modified turnaround is a reduced size turnaround. Essentially, the subdivision code would require basically either a full cul-de-sac of 120 feet in diameter, or it would require a T turnaround of I don't remember the exact size, but it would be larger than what's been proposed or contemplated so far.
Any other questions? Ken?
So, with these exceptions that we're making, how long do they stay on record for?
Essentially, they would, effectively run with the property. If somebody was to subdivide the property again in the future or something like that, it probably would be for consideration again at that point. Essentially, because it's a subdivision modification, kind of once it's in place, there's really not a going back to it, because it's a development standard at the time of the construction or development of the property.
So if they sell it, we kind of lose out on that.
I mean, effectively, as is, it would not be like in zoning parlance, it would be a non-conforming use or a non-conforming activity. It would just be kind of that's the improvements that are outside of the property.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of historical comments here. I can remember when I was a newspaper reporter covering the city council in the late 1960s. There was an alderman on the council then by the name of Robert Becker. And he went through a big explanation and study about whether Center Street could ever be extended from College out to Bradford. And when he did it, we were down at the old city council chambers down the street. There was a huge number of, not huge, but a number of people showed up from the two side streets strongly in opposition to it. And they all started talking about, well, things have been built back there before there were city codes, and buildings were on places that probably wouldn't be approved today, and whatever have you. I mean, then there was a gentleman that lived there by the name of Harold Maves, and many years later, he died, and he had a house there, and his house got bought and tore down, and the folks that bought it built a beautiful house, but it's way back set almost to where the right-of-way would come in on this street. So I don't think we'll ever see Center Street extended beyond what you're talking about here tonight, and this turnaround will be the turnaround for the 3 or 4 houses that are down there impacted by it, and that's going to be the end of it. Because this thing is, and then if you get out over on Wilson Street, I've had several call me over the years and say, well, we just built a work shed at the back, and it's right back there, and we don't want any street coming through us, and we're not going to agree to any right-of-ways and everything else. So this is a non-starter or non-believer, in my opinion, that this will ever happen beyond what these people are trying to do here tonight. And those who live there now have done a nice job of kind of preserving it. They don't complain about it. They don't, it's just a kind of a nice dead-end place to live. And there aren't many of these in town, but this is one that I don't think is ever going to get changed.
I'd like to add, my daughter's friend lives on Center Street, so I've dropped her off many a night, and it needs to turn around. So definitely, more importantly, the way the street is set up, it actually dives down a bit. So there is a potential to many times I've almost run my car off the street. So yeah, definitely. All good.
It is what it is, and I think we just go for the flow and be done with it.
My dad grew up on East Wilson Street, just like a half a block west of there, and with that huge double lot that went all the way back, and it was their dream in the 50s that they would subdivide it and they'd put another house there in the back. It obviously never happened, and we're not in possession of that house anymore, but I'm happy to see that the land is being put to good use, and we're putting another house there, and I support it as written.
I can just address Alderman Farnbach's comment, though. It sounded like you were saying there would be a turnaround. Under what's proposed currently, it would just be kind of the road as it is right now with the driveway coming off of it. So I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
Chairman, I'd just say, the fire department would strongly encourage a turnaround down on the end also.
Kevin?
I guess I'll just sort of signal here real quick. I think hearing from the fire chief and the recommendation from the staff, the sidewalk thing sounds fine. It sounds like we could do that, but I think the turnaround item is it's sticking out to me that I'd hate to lose the ability to do that at some point. And I think as written, there would be no turnaround, and so I think some sort of turnaround would be what secures my support.
Right. So yeah, the dedication would provide at least the opportunity to perhaps provide the what we termed in the plan commission report as the modified turnaround in the future if the city were to construct that. That would be and what that proposal was, just to explain, and I can see if I can put it up on the screen, but would be kind of an extension of Center Street using some of the right-of-way that would be provided with the dedication on 76 going out a ways, and then having that turnaround on their property. So I can, like I said, I can see if I can put up on screen just to show what that represented based on discussion. But
and I would like to add Public Works as well wanted that turnaround. One of the issues is plowing, that there's no place now that we're going to be adding a second driveway. Any type of maneuvering out there is on private property. The right-of-way is pretty narrow. Doing any turning movements, I know that there were many residents that said, that's fine, come on our driveway, but the reality of it is if we go on that with our heavy vehicles that are not made for that kind of pavement, then the city may be liable for that. They already said that their delivery trucks turn around on private driveways as well.
Well, as we're talking about it, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to, Chief. If you need to go in there with a fire truck, you're just going to pull in. If you have to go in and attack a fire, you're going to go right down the street and then worry about backing out later. You're not going to worry about a turnaround.
At present, it's about 280 feet. The code recommends no more than 150 feet. So, yeah, we would, and delay line would have to go down. There's other situations where that occurs, but the narrowness of center makes it very difficult even to put a side down in there. Plus, there is, in addition to public works and public safety, and that side there's the weekly garbage pickup and things. So you have a large garbage truck with poor visibility having to back down a residential street for over 300 feet.
Okay.
So just to confirm, we are discussing going with option 2 though, right? So there is a little bit of a turnaround. It's just reduced from the full cul-de-sac that you talked about.
So what would be in the resolution right now would be a no-build situation where there would just be a driveway coming from, I can put this up, but it would be a driveway coming from the street at Center Street and coming into the property, similar to what the property to the south has currently, where it's a driveway connected to Center Street.
So I'm sorry, pretend like I'm not very smart, right? If I vote yes to 76, there will be no turnaround.
76 would not have an effect.
Okay,
but
77, if I
but
vote yes to
77 would.
77, there would be no turnaround.
Yes, as written currently.
Thank you.
We would probably want to include language, if the council wanted to modify that, there should be a statement in there saying a modified turnaround.
If they develop this and they line the driveways up, it would effectively provide the turnaround. I mean, to me, that would make sense. And do we have the ability, when we approve building on that lot, that we could suggest that or require that?
So the driveway on 750 on this map here is on private property. Then there's no easement or anything on there. So there would need to be, so to connect to it would probably require consent of the property owner to the south.
I'm just thinking logistics, simple logistics.
Or just having,
If you have it right across, I mean, you can just,
I mean, they've accessed this street for everything that's been done there for as long as I remember that street being there. So I don't know that we're really, even if we add another house back there, that we're really changing a lot of what happens there. The garbage truck still has to get there. Fire truck can still get down the street. And we can plow there. We just have to figure out where we pile the snow up at, which hasn't been a real problem lately.
at the end.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't have a problem with either one of them. Let the record reflect Alderman Vogelsinger's here. 725.
I'm no longer
I'll do a
confused.
motion to approve. I think we've already talked about it.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second on 2025-076R, approving a plat of dedication for a portion of Center Avenue. Does anybody in the public want to address this, the property? Come on up.
I wrote a few thoughts so I can stay on track.
Just need to
here. My
identify
name-
your-
I'm sorry, in the microphone.
Yep, thank
You
you.
need to identify your
Yes.
name, not address, just name.
My name is Michelle Lambert. My brother and I, Terrence Gebhardt, own this property. We inherited it from our uncle when he passed away October 30th of 2022. This is something that we inherited, not created this issue. And neither of us live in this area and would like to sell this. And we cannot do that until it's made a buildable lot. I've been working with the city since June of 2023 in order to resolve this and follow the requirements to make this a buildable lot. As I said, the ultimate goal is to sell. It's taken me a year to get to this meeting. I was given the recommendation from the city of what would make this and agreed to the plat of dedication with the understanding and maybe my misunderstanding, that the city was also getting that plat from Mr. Dennis Anderson, who ultimately chose not to give that plat a dedication. And I understand that. That's his right. I also want to I want to work with the city, but I also want to be respectful of the neighborhood that currently is there and not disrupt their life by a home that's built there. And that's why I asked for the no variances, or I'm sorry, the variance of what the city is requiring for the turnaround. To me, it made the most sense to make a driveway, much as you said, right across from Mr. Anderson's driveway, into that piece of property to access it. As you can see, all along that road that we're talking about, that they're talking about making go through, right next to that property, which you can't see very well on Google Maps, there's a fence that goes all along that entire piece of property. Also, I'm sorry, right here, there's a fence that goes all along this. There's also one here. This road, this someone else's property, and access has not been granted. Then you come into Kramer Court and this barn that's in your easement as well. Over the years, numerous things have been built along the easement. So much as the mayor has said, that road will very unlikely ever come through. That Mr. Anderson's house at 750 has been there for over 50 years. Much like you said, snow removal, garbage pickup, et cetera, has occurred without any incident to date. So my ask is to grant the variance of option 3, or no improvements, which conforms to what is currently there in that neighborhood. The only other thing that I'll point out in what the city has put together, and to further my point of this is not something that we created. My grandparents lived at 750 East Wilson Street. This piece of property was never joined in the tax records with 750 East Wilson Street, much like it says in this document that in the email. The subject's property was at one time part of property 750 East Wilson Street before that property was sold separately in 2018. That is incorrect. We did not separate that property. I wasn't in the picture when that occurred, but it was not separated. And I looked back in King County records for as far back as my family's been paying taxes, and I've been paying taxes for my uncle. It's never been joined with that property. Just so you know, this is not an issue that we created by separating that. So again, my ask is to conform with the neighborhood, have a driveway directly across, which essentially gives you that access that you were talking about. It's not an area that has sidewalks on either side of the road. It's a very quiet neighborhood. And the neighbors last meeting all came and would like it to stay that way. And that's our hope. Any questions for me?
I think the way we've got it written, I think it kind of leaves it as close to the way it is now as we can, with still having some, easement on it. Anybody have any questions? If not,
Share as much or as little as you like. Do you intend to build on the property and then sell, or do you plan to sell to somebody who plans to build?
I plan to sell it to someone who wants to build a home there. We've been trying to sell it, not understanding how the city of Batavia works, was hoping that the owner would be able to tackle this, but we've been unable to sell it without resolving this issue first. We've had about 6 offers on the property, and in fact, the gentleman, it's a single family. They want to build a single family home. And the reason they want to build it in this area is for the very reason that the rest of the community likes this area. Is it's a dead-end street, it's very quiet, and they want it to remain that way. That's the intention.
Yeah, and I guess this would be a question for the city then. For a buyer who's not here at the table right now, is there a way for us to compel them to put their driveway in a particular spot that facilitates turnaround?
So long as they meet our building codes.
Okay. If we offer this variance, we lose any control over creating a turnaround.
Right, and two private driveways do not really, it'll function as but we don't have like rights to go on private property.
Kind of what I'm thinking is
Yeah.
like if we get lucky enough that they happen to put the driveway right where we want them,
Yeah.
great. But if we can't compel them to do that,
Right.
and I'm not unsympathetic. I get it, right? Like it's certainly
You actually
thing.
could. I mean, as a condition of the variance, you could say that you want the driveway to be at the hammerhead. I mean, you could require that as a condition, yes.
You can,
Could.
sorry.
Could we pass the ordinance tonight and have that included, or would that require sort of a different drafting?
You could put that as a condition, and then we'll revise the ordinance at the final.
Before city council.
Before city council. We can do that.
It makes the most sense. I don't know anyone that would purchase that property and not put the driveway there. Honestly. There
I
pretty
haven't-
much is already a turnaround. It doesn't show on this map, but if you physically went out to the area, and you can kind of see a little bit. I went back, I think, because I had to get rid of the trees. I think this is a 2017 map because of the current one. But right here, you can see somebody continually goes in here, turns back. So there actually pretty much is someone turns around there all the time.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I hear what you're saying there. It's from what I'm hearing from the chief and sort of thinking of kind of the public works perspective and waste management perspective. Someone turning around is maybe a little different than sort of a however many ton fire truck or however many ton garbage truck. And I think if we can find a way to meet that need, kind of get a turnaround by compelling them to put the driveway in a certain spot, then I see no reason not to move forward with this. But I do think we kind of have a responsibility to protect our interests here a little bit and kind of get a way to get our big trucks around. That's where I stand at least. And thank you.
You know, on that note, and keep in mind, I have been on the streets, so I'm familiar with the issue of turning around. That rough spot there may be from me turning around. However,
No, this is 2017, so I
Oh,
don't think so.
2017, okay. So part of the question really is, if we were to, I think we should put in a variance to kind of force where am I looking, Scott? Right, yeah. If we were to put a variance in to kind of force the driveway, the placement of the future driveway, does she have to come back, or is it?
No.
Okay.
No, it would just be part of the final ordinance.
It's just something that we'll add in at the council level, or from the committee. We can put that additional requirement on it, and then we'll vote on that when we get it to council.
Okay.
It'll be part of the ordinance.
Perfect.
Chris?
Listen, the street's been the same way forever. It's functioned perfectly fine. And as everybody's already indicated, it's still private property. So, I mean, I don't see any reason why we are
You
not.
guys like to see us take the opportunity when we have it to
I
do that. If we can make it simpler, my thought is, especially like for public works, if they're using a small truck to do this little half a block or quarter block, that would be easy enough to turn around in, to get in and clean it out easily.
I feel we're being
Abby?
intrusive and we should approve.
Yeah, I can understand taking the opportunity. I do see that. It feels also a little bit like we're building our parking lots for Black Friday traffic, like we're building an area for the biggest truck that might go through there at some point, when it's not necessary for 99.9% of the time, to add more asphalt, to add more paving, to create a hassle for the homeowner, the property owner. I could go either way. I see taking the opportunity, but I also don't see it as the biggest deal right now. If it's not going to
There's
develop
going to be a
any-
driveway in there one way or the other.
Right. So if it's not going to develop any further, and we've maintained, without a problem here for how many years, I'm still leaning towards leaving it as is in the ordinance.
Because right now,
I think I
Mr.
agree with
Anderson.
Alderman Beck, you know, I mean, I think I agree. And so let's just pass this and be done.
Well, you made the motion, so unless you want to amend
I know I
your
am.
motion, we can do it as it
My
is.
motion, I still maintain my motion.
Okay, and who was the second? Matt? Jen, go
I
ahead.
just have a question. So it looks like it kind of like falls off right before Mr. Anderson's where this new driveway would be, and that's like gravel and everything. So if we were to require the bump outs, is that going to be paved or is that going to stay gravel as it is?
We would require it to be gravel, or, I'm sorry, paved driveway. We do not allow gravel driveways. So that would have to, anything that's additional would have to be paved.
So if this new property, then part of what's going into where it's cut off right now, and maybe that's just the look of it, but does it like actually fall off? So part of that is going to now be paved up to the Anderson driveway?
It's going to be
or-
kind of offset because they can't put their driveway on Mr. Anderson's property without trespassing. So it's going to have to be a little bit of an offset to the street. Because if you see where the property lines are drawn there, that's the actual property lines. So Mr. Anderson's driveway is completely on his own private property.
And this is the easement, however, correct? And
Yes.
so the road, paved road stops right here. And the proposal that makes the most sense is to make that, and I was aware that any new driveway could not be gravel. That's the city code, correct? It has to be paved. So it would make the most sense for that to come down and then curve in, right? And that would all be paved. That makes the most sense to me. I mean, because that's, you require paved driveways, right?
That as being a turnaround is you're going from pavement and then you're going to gravel, and I just see the wear and tear if we're having them across from each other. I mean, that kind of convinces me, like I could have gone either way, but as you said, like,
Yeah, in favor of taking the opportunity, so Batavia is an older town, right? Zoning was, if we're honest, not taken too seriously until, probably post World War II, right? I mean, and I've been subject to stuff like this, on my own property. So we went to go to replace a deck. Turns out the easements were all wrong. I had to go through not a year. I think I got it done in 8 months. So I beat you. But the point is, at some point, somebody had an opportunity to fix it. They didn't. And it was like a landmine, and then I stepped on it, honestly, 30 years later. So if there is an opportunity to, at least make somebody's life more convenient down the road, I think it's worth taking now.
I still maintain my motion. Can we vote?
Keep in mind, it's two ordinances. The first one is.
Right, we're going to vote on this first. With this one being the plat of dedication for a portion of it, I don't know if that's really the one that we would want to modify or the variation, so that would make more sense. So I think here, this is basically just saying that the plat of dedication that we're looking for would be, what is in the ordinance now. And that's what the motion is in front of us.
Correct.
Does anybody else have any other comments?
The gentleman who stood up, I don't know if he would like
No.
to. Oh, it's Drew.
Drew hiding behind
The
the
man
post.
hiding behind the
Got
post.
those, you can't see through the post.
There might be somebody else who had their hand up.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Anderson. My wife Linda and I have resided at 750 Center Street. I refuse to call it an avenue because it's one block long. We've resided there for nearly 50 years. When we built our home, we were told we could run a driveway off the end of the street with the understanding that someday that street might be extended and we would have to deal with it and build something different at that time. Like I said, that was nearly 50 years ago. The street is still a dead end. We've enjoyed the opportunity to raise our family as it is today. I was a police officer in Batavia for 36 years, and I became rather intimately acquainted with the laws, the ordinances, the code used in the city of Batavia, and the need to use those for enforcement. As I told the Plan Commission a couple of weeks ago, I think that, and as I learned as a police officer, that common sense has to enter into many decisions. And I think this is one of those very rare and unusual situations where common sense needs to preside over the law. And I urge this body to follow the recommendation of the Plan Commission and grant the variances that Mrs. Lambert has requested. Thank you. Oh, I wanted to add one more thing. I knew there was one thing. There's been a lot of concern expressed about access, about turning around. Let me say that in all of the years that we've been there, we've had every kind of utility vehicle, fire vehicle, ambulance, garbage trucks, everything imaginable. There's so little traffic on Center, and I've never heard one driver complain about having to turn around in our driveway as we do every day. There's a little bit of a back up when we back out of our garage every day. We turn, we go forward. Everybody can do the same thing. We're more than willing to let them use our driveway. I see no need for anything to be extended. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve Resolution 2025-76R as it is in the packet. Roll call, please.
Baraza. Aye. Lancy.
Aye.
Beck. Aye. Malay. Malone.
Aye.
Sofa.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Barron. Aye. Lehman. Aye. Lohman.
Aye.
Pieper. Fehrenbach.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Vogelsinger.
Aye.
That'll go on with the positive recommendation. And then we have item 8, which is Resolution 2025-77R, approving variations to the subdivision regulations for Center Avenue, Michelle Lambert applicant.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Roll call, please.
We have comments.
Some questions.
Sorry. Discussion?
I was just going to say, from reading this document and listening to Mrs. Lambert, that I'm going to vote in favor of the Plan Commission. Obviously, there was a lot of discussion and review and everything that has already gone on, and I don't feel the need to do anything different than what has already been discussed and decided on by the Plan Commission. So I will vote in favor for the variances.
Just curious if we had an estimate of cost, that if we don't approve it, what that will add to the redevelopment? If they have to add the...
Are you talking about if we required the whole hammerhead?
Yeah.
No, I don't think we've done any cost estimates on that.
I know this is a dangerous question, guys. Could you just ballpark it? Are we talking like $200 or like?
More than 200.
Yeah, like just kind of give me a very, very, very rough.
I see the sidewalk cost, but.
Okay, all right, thank you.
It's a cost that whoever develops it wouldn't want to pay.
I just have a question for clarification. So if we vote yes on this, then we're not requiring them to put their driveway Okay.
This is just as the resolution is written, allowing the variances so that they don't have to do a turnaround. Okay. No more discussion. Roll call, please.
Braza. Aye. Lancy.
Aye.
Beck.
Aye.
Malone.
No.
Solfa.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Barron.
Aye.
Lehman. Aye. Lohman.
Aye.
Pieper. Fehrenbach.
No.
Anderson.
Aye.
Vogelsinger.
Aye.
So that's 10.
Okay. We'll go on to council with a positive recommendation as it's written. So Monday night it'll be done. Come on up and use the mic.
Just for clarification, as it's written, that requires fee in lieu of sidewalk, correct?
Yes.
No one has given me a cost estimate as to what that would be. Much like your budgets are, this amount not to exceed this amount?
I just calculated that based off of our street program prices that were in the agenda, and it was an average of $14 a square foot. So based on 105 feet frontage times 5 foot, it's just a tad under $7,400.
Okay. And so my understanding of that is then when whoever purchases this property, then they pay that amount to the city? That's correct?
Whenever it's
To be
developed.
determined at some other place where they're going to put that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a question, kind of along that. If they decide, whoever develops it, if they decide to put in the sidewalk, then they wouldn't have to pay the fee, is that correct? So they could always put whoever purchases it could put the sidewalk in as opposed to paying the fee.
Doubt that'll happen.
Yeah.
If they could do it cheaper.
Hey, I mean, I could be surprised, but I just doubt it.
Options, you throw out options and let them decide.
Maybe they have a concrete.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Get their
Maybe
neighbors
they
to go
want
for
their
it and put
kids
it
to
all the way
play
down
on the
one side.
sidewalks in color and do all sorts of designs. Who knows?
Never said no to a
Options.
sidewalk, but.
Let them decide.
All right. All right, let's move on to item 9, which is ordinance 2025-31, amendments to the text of the zoning code, chapter 4.1, site regulations, City of Batavia applicant.
So this ordinance before you tonight, the Plan Commission did review at a public hearing some proposed modifications. Basically, staff evaluated our rear setbacks in our residential districts. And through the course of that review, we also looked at what other municipalities allow for allowed encroachments. And that's where we did find that a number of our contemporaries and, in the area do have some level of additional encroachment for what I'll call taller decks. Basically, under our current code, anything under 36 inches in height has an encroachment established already. But because we don't have any encroachments for higher decks, those are required to follow the zoning code setbacks for rear, interior side, et cetera. So with that investigation, we did feel it was appropriate to bring that to the Plan Commission for review and consideration, and as a proposed change to the allowed encroachments that are allowed by code. So with that, the Plan Commission did review that at their May 7th meeting. There was substantial discussion about that, and essentially, I guess I should back up. So this would be any deck taller than 36 inches could encroach into 8 feet into a required setback, a required rear setback specifically, excuse me. So that would allow basically opportunity for, say, stairs or other elements of a deck to go into that area. Or just allow for additional flexibility for residents to consider an uncovered porch or uncovered deck on the rear of their properties. So, like I said, the Plan Commission discussed that. There was a good discussion amongst the commissioners. First, they were wondering kind of how this compares to balconies, because balconies are defined in the code and have a allowed setback. And essentially, that's that if they're on their own without any support, that's a balcony. So that's allowed 4 foot already into the rear setback. There was discussion about whether there should be some level of height limitations, but ultimately the Plan Commission did recommend or did find that it would be appropriate to make this change, mostly to be in line with our other community, nearby communities. So the Plan Commission did vote by a vote of 5-0 to recommend this change, and it is before you tonight for consideration.
Okay, does anybody have any comments, questions? It's pretty simple. Okay, no questions, no comments. Make the motion that we recommend to council ordinance 2531, amending to the text of the zoning code, chapter 4.1, site regulations, City of Batavia applicant.
Second.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Baraza. Lancy.
Aye.
Beck. Malay. Malone.
Aye.
Solfa.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Barron. Lehman. Loman. Pieper. Fehrenbach. Anderson. Vogelsinger. That's 12.
Right, thank you. Up next is ordinance 2025-008, restriction on sale of kratom and hemp-derived products. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. We're seeking approval of a new ordinance that restricts the purchase of currently unregulated hemp-derived THC products and kratom to individuals over 21 years of age. This ordinance also imposes safe storage requirements to limit potential access by minors and packaging restrictions that would eliminate product packaging that appeals to children or looks like well-known established brands like candy companies and things like that. So the goal of this provision is obviously to limit the appeal of those products to kids, but also to prevent accidental ingestion by young children who may find an adult's hemp-derived THC and then mistake it for candy. So as you may recall, a proposal regarding these substances was brought to committee in January. At that time, a ban on these substances was rejected, but there was some interest expressed regarding potential restrictions. I was also directed to work with the business community on future proposals, which I have done. I do want to thank Cheryl Cryer, the owner of Urban Apothecary, for her input and perspective on this topic, as well as Dr. Heidi Sikora, who's an advocate for the American Kratom Association. She met with Laura and I a few months back. Both have voiced support for the regulations that are being sought in this ordinance. We view this proposal as necessary due to the inaction at the federal and state levels of government, largely based on disagreements over how to regulate the substances. For some history, the hemp-derived THC became prevalent following a loophole in the 2018 Farm Bill. Manufacturers have excelled at extracting THC from the hemp and can create some pretty highly potent untested products. Both kratom and hemp-derived THC products have not been evaluated or approved by the FDA, and the FDA, DEA, and some other federal entities have all expressed concerns about the lack of regulation related to these products. At a minimum, there's incomplete safety data on these products. There's been limited testing completed to the effects and risks associated with the substances. And there's a lot of publicly available information from the aforementioned federal agencies and reputable medical sites about the potential dangers and concerns associated with the use of these substances. In our own city, I can tell you there are businesses that have marketed these products as alternatives to recreational use cannabis. They compare the product effects to that of cannabis found in dispensaries. Makes sense to me then that the regulations and age restrictions on these products mirror that of recreational use cannabis. As stated, this proposed ordinance is designed to address concerns about underage access to these products. I'll also touch on the fact that there have been multiple studies just on the effects of similar psychoactive products on youth brain development. The brain continues to develop into our young to mid-20s, and there are detrimental impacts on adolescent brain development related to substances of this nature. State restricts access to alcohol, cannabis, and tobacco to individuals under 21 years of age. So this proposal would create parity with those substances and recognize the risk associated with underage access to these products. So I do recommend approval of the ordinance as presented. Any questions?
I have a quick comment. I'm really pleased with kind of the work that has gone into this. I know that we heard a whole lot about this when it was first up. I think it speaks volumes to our Chief Blowers that you went out, you engaged the community. I want to thank our business folks for engaging in that. It seems like we got the right stakeholders at the table this time, which took more time, effort, some heartache a little bit, but I think that makes me feel pretty confident about what we have here, knowing that we've done the hard work of sitting and chatting with who we need to chat with. So thank you for the hard work, and thank you to our community members who participate in that as well.
So in terms of the amendments that have been made to the original one, these are all acceptable by everybody you spoke with in terms of the businesses, correct?
So I've not spoken to every business, but I have worked with primarily Cheryl Cryer, and then with the American Kratom Association. I've not had a conversation with each individual business. Again, I touched on last time I was here, there are a number of businesses selling these products, and then we still, as good of a handle as I think I have on who's selling these products, I can assure you there are still some companies out there that I'm not 100% sure are selling these products. No, they have not all weighed in on these different provisions. I have spoken to another business owner from, drawing a blank, it's the one on Wind Energy Pass, Black Forest Smoke and Vapor. I spoke to him on the phone. He just asked for some clarifications. Outside of that, he didn't offer any feedback.
That was going to be one question I had, was how are we going to identify which businesses get notified so that they know what the rules are after we approve this? I want to make sure that we blanket everybody out there that has the ability to sell it so that they at least know what the rules are, whether they sell it or not. That's their choice.
Sure. So we're going to cast a wide net. I think that's our first step. But if we miss somebody at the end of the day, the whole goal here is compliance and education. So if we can, if we identify a business that hasn't been notified and we come, aware of that, then we can certainly work on educating them. As long as they're willing to comply and come into compliance with the terms of the ordinance, then that's really the goal here.
Thank you for all the work you've done on this. I know you took over something that Chief Mazza had started, and then you walked into this, so thank you for talking to the multiple people who were invested in this. And I think it's a really interesting ordinance because it's a product that is used in multiple different ways. Some people use it recreationally and some people use it medicinally. And so we're trying to create an ordinance that doesn't hinder what some people need for their health and well-being. And so I think you did from working with people like Cheryl, you've done a nice job in trying to do something that is still making it available to those who need it, but also protecting our youth and our minors. So thank you.
Thank you.
If not, I'll make a motion that we recommend to council ordinance 25008, restriction on sale of kratom and hemp-derived products. Motion by Wolf, second by Lehman. Yes, I was just going to ask if you'd like to come up. And on your way up, I'll thank you for being part of helping to get this done.
I just want to say thank you to everyone in City Council for taking a pause when we were here last time so we could back up and unpack this properly. And a big thanks to Chief Flowers. I hope he never leaves Batavia because this has been a fantastic experience and I got to know him. And on a side note, he also helped me with a personal matter and went above and beyond. And I just feel very embraced and supported by the community and by Chief. So that was wonderful. I just wanted to kind of give you my perspective on how this all kind of unfolded and just tell you just a couple of things. So I met with Chief several times, first at City Hall here, another time at the police station, and then we talked on the phone and exchanged emails, and then he came to my shop. And I just laid out various scenarios to troubleshoot because my shop's a little bit different. I have a pet shop next door to my shop, and there's no wall in between. And so anyway, I've been kind of practicing my spiel when little kids walk in, and I'm like, and I know now where to put the signs and everything, so we're good there. But I just wanted to say that I think that this was the best possible outcome, absolute best possible outcome, and I'm going to tell you why. But I wanted to tell you a little bit what happened with me since I was here last. I have hosted 2 legislative tours in my shop. The first one was with Maura Hirschauer, and the second one was with her colleagues in other towns, because our state reps are also getting pressure in Springfield at the same time. So they wanted to educate, they wanted to be educated on what does this wellness side of hemp look like, as a lot of it just paints it out to be this bad actors, and I'm not that, and we're not that at my shop. I was also on the cover of the Chicago Tribune. They came out and did an article, and that was frightening and interesting, but here we are. And then the other thing I wanted to just remind everyone is that hemp is federally legal by the 2018 Farm Bill. And because of what happened during 2020 when they learned they could convert a CBD molecule to a THC molecule and the federal appeals court got involved, that's kind of why we're in this gray area. Marijuana is not federally legal. And the system is broken in Illinois. I don't need to go too far into that, but I'm working with the Illinois Hemp Business Association and with the Illinois Department of Agriculture to close that gap. So we're going to see that down the line. Possibly cannabis and hemp, that gap may be closed and it may be like a tiered system. But anyway, I think this is a good in-between measure. Most of all, this exercise has shown me what I mean to the town. What I'm doing in this town matters. I mean, I think 3/4 of you may be my customers, not to call anyone out, and many, many others. And so what this has shown me, one, is what I matter to the town. And 2, just not to make it about me personally, but that really did a lot for me in here, in my person, if that even makes sense. It really did. And it also showed me that y'all believe in the work that we're doing, too, okay? So, yeah, there are some bad actors out there. I think this ordinance is going to help get them in line so we all feel safe and comfortable. I'm already following this rule and always have. Anyway, so now it's 21 and older. It has to be either behind the counter or in a designated area with signage, and there's specific outline for that signage, and it's definitely something that we've already started to rearrange the shop and put in place. And I've also touched base with several of the other vape shops, smoke shops, bars, and other places that are selling CBD, and these, I think, it's really hard to say unless we go into every shop in town, to just say, hey, I understand this ordinance, I can help you. If you want to reach out to me, that I'm also available for that, to help that, of course, and if there's any question, of course, we'll just defer to chief. Anyway, in closing, I support this ordinance, and I thank you again for listening and hearing me and taking a pause to get it right. It really made a difference, big difference. Thank you.
Lukashevsky, east side of Batavia, and I apologize because I'm coming after the horses out of the barn. And I also feel like I really need to apologize for not being as involved as I should have been in our community. But I do want to state something that I'm very passionate about and I think is very important and critical to our city. And we all know there's a difference between THC and CBD, right? Right, okay. So THC gets you high. CBD does not. So I want to talk about the THC and the ability to access that in our community. And I was here when this first came up for discussion years ago, and I apologize for not being back. But I still remember when I presented my concern about selling recreational marijuana. And I remember three of the replies. I just can't forget them because one was, I'm not afraid to make a hard decision. Another one was, I saw the store in North Aurora that just opened. It looked clean. And then another person said, why should we lose out on the tax dollars? In so many ways, it was almost hurtful to me because I felt like I saw a city council that wasn't doing due diligence. I don't want to make any enemies. I want to be a community that cares for one another, loves on one another, and wants the best for one another. And I felt like there was something missing that night. And I appreciate Chief Blowers as well because of what he's brought to light here. But my concern is that why should we be selling anything that has THC in it that resembles anything that would cause a kid to want to eat it? I hope our city council members are doing due diligence now because I have plenty of evidence and recorded information from states that have legalized marijuana. And to the answer of why should we lose on the tax dollars? Because we're going to give them to emergency services. 15% more work goes to the police departments in the state of California. The emergency services in California have increased 3 times. I was on the phone today with Delnor Hospital. I'm still waiting for a reply of their increase. My petition to you is THC is being minimalized as a recreational drug. And I'll tell you why it is just not recreational. If somebody chooses it to use it regularly, it can create all sorts of mental health issues. I want to give you one example because we're living in it right now. My neighbor across the street ended up moving because his son was going to Rotolo Middle School. And I'm pretty sure if somebody wants to talk to him, I'll leave his name out. I'm sure he'd make a private conversation with you. His son was testing positive at Rotolo every time he tested him for THC. He ended up going to Rosecrans for a total of 3 months. This was 3 years ago. So what happens here, what we decide, creates a current in our city to the point where it's already affecting young adults and children. A young man who has been so helpful because he speaks 4 different languages. He's 16 years old, and he's helping me give driving lessons to a Ukrainian woman. And he interprets for me in the back seat. He's a great kid. One day he decided to confide in me and said, since I've come here from Russia, I've had people give me all sorts of gummies. And I was doing it for almost 2 years, and I thought I was going to die. He said he became a different person for an entire year. Now, this is somebody that just came here and began going to a high school. And so my petition to you all is that it's not about tax dollars. It's about a healthy, family-friendly, family-first environment. And I'll leave you with this. You know, And if anybody wants, I'd be happy to send you, I don't want to bore you with all this, I got 2 pages of detailed description of what happens to a community when cannabis is sold recreationally, and I know we're already down that road. Castle Rock, Colorado, you can look it up, is one of the most desirable cities to live in because it decided not to allow recreational marijuana. And you know where their tax dollars are coming from now? An increase in city participation. They have amusement parks, they have city parks, and people come from out of the city to participate in it. Our people want, our residents want a healthy environment. They don't care about the tax dollars. And so this will come up if it's a year later or 2 years later. Please think about that. Feel free to reach out to me. I have other people that have been a long time investigating this. I'm going to close because I know it's past your bedtime. My story. In 1975, I was a child of the 70s going to a college in Lincoln, Illinois, and we were smoking marijuana, recreational marijuana, we'll call it, almost every day of the week. And it was 1/10 as potent as it is now. And one day in my dorm room, my friends, who up until this point I trusted, I was convinced that they were out to get me. And the first person that came near me was going to get hit in the head with my lamp. I was already planning on how I was going to kill the person around me. I started to experience severe paranoia. Now, if you look into that, look into the cases of paranoia coming from anxiety, which we know are happening with our teens, and you'll be astounded by the mental illness that is increasing because of this. So I just want to leave you with that. I want to say thank you for serving our community, but I want to challenge you to serve our community with due diligence and for the sake of a family-friendly, safe community.
Hi, Larry Winters, live on the west side of Batavia. I'm 70. I grew up in the 70s. We're talking about drugs. I grew up with a lot of drugs, not personally, but all around me. Very dangerous things. We vote on sidewalks safe for kids. We're interested in kids. I live by schools. So if we have drugs that are available to young kids, I think you all know that's very dangerous. So I'm going to encourage you to vote.
Anybody else? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Roll call, please.
Graza. Aye. Lancy.
Aye.
Beck. Aye. Malay. Malone.
Aye.
Sofa.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Barron. Aye. Lehman. Aye. Lohman. Aye. Pieper. Fehrenbach.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Vogelsinger. Aye. That's 12.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work on this, Chief. I'm glad we got that done. Okay, and we'll move on to item 11, which is Public Safety Video Surveillance System Policy.
Thank you. So this item is for discussion. The policy is specific to the police department, but will also serve as the city policy for anyone who's given access to the surveillance system. Police department worked with city admin and the human resources department on drafting this policy. Our goals with this policy were to establish guidelines for system use, while also ensuring individual rights are upheld. The policy requires that the system logs access and provides for supervisory oversight of system use. The department will conduct an annual audit to ensure the system is effective and to identify any issues with deployment or use of the system. In the interest of trust and transparency, the city will be posting signage in areas under surveillance. Staff did confer with members of the Batavia Diversity Initiative on this policy, and these public discussions about the system further build trust. In response to this discussion, I did receive a couple of questions, so I just want to go over those right now. The first question was whether or not the draft that the draft policy did not specify how long surveillance video footage will be retained. and if the plan was still to keep it for 30 days. So the answer to that is yes, we still plan on a 30-day retention. That was not included in the policy intentionally to afford flexibility in the event future retention schedules are changed. The example that I would give would be if we chose to expand the camera network but not the associated local storage capacity, that could impact the length of time that video could be retained. Certainly willing, if council directs us to add the 30 days retention into the policy, that would be fine. The other question was who exactly within the police department will be trained and authorized to use and access the surveillance cameras. That's going to be close to 100% of our staff. The reason for that is because of operational needs. There will be some differences in access levels and access to certain sensitive cameras. Those decisions will be made not at a policy decision, but at more of an operations level. The reason, though, is that officers need real-time or post-incident access to footage for safety and efficiency purposes in order to gather evidence of incidents that they're actively investigating. Example would be the investigation of a vehicle crash downtown. The investigation could be impeded or delayed if the investigating officer did not have access or needed to wait for a supervisor or other authorized person to give them the footage. The reason that the majority of our civilian staff would have access to the system, example would be our records division. They continuously monitor our booking area when we have a detainee in custody, and they do that for officer safety purposes to make sure that the detainee is not in distress, doesn't need assistance, anything like that. So they have access for those sorts of reasons. They also process our FOIAs and subpoenas, so they would need access to be able to fulfill those responsibilities. Everyone accessing the system will be logged and adequate controls put in place to prevent misuse. The third question that I had was about the policy addressing public surveillance cameras and their use, but there were discussions and questions about surveillance cameras usage in private areas of government buildings. So the person wanted to know who had access to those cameras and footage, and how will they be utilized? Essentially, how will it be communicated to city staff that the cameras will not be misused or employed in a Big Brother manner? So all the cameras are on one system, which is what we're referring to as the public safety video surveillance system. In the police department, we're going to assign rights to specific cameras based on operational needs and public safety implications. This will encompass most cameras on the system, but there will be some cameras that are restricted from police personnel in those non-public areas or employee workspace cameras to protect employee privacy. Some access will remain at some of the higher levels of the organization, and that's just because if we did need to access that footage, there do need to be people within the organization who can access it and download recordings and things like that. There's also legitimate work purposes for non-police personnel that may need to access specific cameras to improve their efficiency in department operations. Any requests for cameras, access to cameras that is coming from non-police personnel will go through Laura and through the Human Resources Department, and then they would be given a copy of this department policy and told that they need to abide by the restrictions within. Does anyone have any additional questions or further discussion on the surveillance policy? Yes.
Yeah, real simple questions. So the Batavia School District just had a situation happen where they got a FOIA request for footage, for public surveillance footage. The situation was they had a accident in their parking lot, and somebody, said, "Hey, there's a camera. Let's go ahead and try to FOIA it." The FOIA was declined, and the reason they gave was it potentially shows the scope of view of the camera, which potentially could be a safety issue because it would show the limitations of what that camera could see. So that being said, in situations like this, if you get a FOIA request, right, whether it's, hey, you know what, I'm in the middle of divorce proceedings and I think my husband went to this woman's house and, I saw there's a camera right there, right? Just whatever the reason being. What does that look like? Will you be blurring out faces, stuff like that? Like what happens there?
So there may need to be redactions made to surveillance footage. The particular example that you gave about the Batavia School District is something that I would probably want to run by our legal counsel before giving you an opinion on that, but that is an interesting and potentially compelling reason for denial of a request for footage. But I would need to run that past our legal counsel.
Do we already have a policy for the body-worn cameras as far as what can be FOIA'd and what the procedures are and who gets to see the footage that's on those. So I'm imagining that this policy is similar to that.
Probably not, because the body worn cameras are regulated more so by state statute, and we follow state statute in our policy.
Okay. So there are two separate policies then for
Yes.
that, okay. Jen?
So I have two questions. The first question kind of goes along the line of somebody being able to FOIA the request, like, going through a divorce and they want to see if their potential or their future ex-spouse is going into certain businesses and stuff. Is that grounds for somebody being able to get access to that, or has to be a very specific reason for somebody to be able to get that information, protection of people going into specific businesses?
Well, a lot of times we don't necessarily know the reason that somebody is submitting a FOIA. That's not a requirement that they provide that. Again, I think at this point, based on the comments by Alderperson Fehrenbach, we probably need to confer with legal counsel a little bit further about our ability to deny such requests.
And then my second question is kind of along the lines, the 30 day of keeping. What if we have something where we're subpoenaed by the courts to provide? Does it have to be within 30 days? Or are we able to get that coverage back?
So video that isn't retained for evidentiary purposes, which we would certainly do in any case where we have an actual criminal investigation and we're retaining evidence, anything outside of 30 days gets written over and would no longer be available. So we can't go back beyond the 30-day retention period.
So if it's an active case, then you would keep it open, and if it's a closed case?
Yeah, we will actually transfer it to a separate medium, and we'll put it into our evidence vault or through our secure evidence cloud that we utilize.
And if we receive a subpoena asking for information that is beyond our retention period, we could simply respond that we don't have any footage responsive to that request.
Excellent.
If I may, when we first discussed this, we tied in some ways the retention period. We asked our legal counsel kind of what the shortest retention period we could use was and still comply with FOIA. Because generally speaking, FOIA does presume that all government records are public. So there's a number of exemptions of why you can exempt things, sort of to what Alderman Fehrenbach mentioned, like security systems. So for example, we've also got these on some of our substations. Those are more likely to be denied than perhaps a parking lot type thing. So there's a lot of case-by-case basis. It also depends on what's being shown in the video, what's being asked. And those are situations we can work with our legal counsel on. But in setting the retention period at 30 days, that was really the shortest we could set it while still ensuring that we can respond to any required FOIAs, but that we're not keeping them too long to try to minimize that period of when people can access that footage.
Did the Batavia Community Diversity Initiative have input on the draft of this policy?
Oh, I'm going to defer to Max on that. He worked with former Chief Mazza, and he probably has some more information.
I want to say last year sometime we met with a couple of members. They were very clear they didn't want to speak on behalf of the whole initiative, but we did get some feedback, and some of those things that did come up were FOIA. A lot of the questions were about who can get access, how is it being used, how are we making sure that it's not being used discriminatorily, and those are things we tried to address throughout the policy, from a shorter retention period to things like an annual audit. That was not something that was in our original policy, but to address that being like, when have we used this? How has this been helpful? Are there specific incidents or cases where we have used the camera footage to catch criminals or to protect someone's rights? So those are all things that kind of came up, and then we worked to address them throughout the policy.
I remember watching that meeting when you talked about that, and it's my understanding, speaking for members from that organization, that there was going to be a follow-up. So I'm surprised that the policy a draft of it wasn't shown to them, or there wasn't any type of follow-up. I'd like to see that. I would feel more comfortable voting on this. Well, I guess it's the committee, right? The whole.
This is just a discussion.
Right.
Discussion tonight.
So I'd like to encourage you to follow up with them to see what their thoughts are on this policy.
We can do that.
And I think that to me is something that's important as this is put into place and we start to use it, that we actually look at it and say, okay, we spent X number of dollars to put all these cameras out here, what are we actually finding with it? What are we actually benefiting from? Do we have a better, knowledge of what happens at our electric substations? I mean, I think that might be something we could actually use it for, is to find out what kind of damage we have from rodents and be able to actually see it on a regular basis to determine, hey, maybe there's something different we need to do there to save, 20 power outages a year by changing something there. I think that, to me, I want to see some benefit from this other than, hey, we caught somebody that went out and defaced something downtown.
There was a really good example the weekend before last in downtown Naperville. Communities out, even in our area, are experiencing flash mobs in their downtowns. And the surveillance system in the downtown in Naperville helped them to quickly apprehend the individuals who are at the core of doing some destructive things. And so,
I just see, the motorcycle groups that get together, the car guys that get together and destroy intersections and other things. That, to me, would be something this would be very useful for. Leah?
Thank you for bringing this. A question about the video log and video supervision. It says in there that it would record the date and time the system was accessed, name of person, and stuff like that. But it doesn't, there's nothing like reason why some footage was accessed. And I know that was when Mark was on council, that was something that he kept bringing forward, is the reason, the why. And I'm not seeing that in this draft. And I feel like that's important for transparency issues.
I don't know that the system has a way to log why someone's accessing it. We can look at that, but
I can kind of touch on it. I can also touch on this. This is total legal situation. It's an audit trail. That's not what an audit trail does. It's not the way it works. It's just not.
Yeah, and the idea is that when they're giving the permissions, that's kind of when that filter is in place. So I equate it to like a card access in a building, right? So Laura can access every door in the building, whereas, Sarah and me can only get in 2 doors or whatever. Same concept. Hey, you can only see this camera or whatever. But unfortunately, when they go to look at that camera, you're not going to be able to, you can tell date, time, so you could deduce some things from that, but you're not going to say, oh, they went in there to investigate so, and it's not, they're not typing that in when they go into the system.
I mean, couldn't that be a requirement for it when they?
You could log that, I guess. You could create like an Excel, but
I'm just saying, when you go in and you say, I'm going back 13 days and I want to get this because somebody FOIA'd it, I could say it's FOIA request number 5.
Sure, if it's something like formal like that, but the whole point of this thing, and you make up a great point, because these things are so useful beyond just security. So, they should be using it all the time, But yeah, to your point, there's really no way to do that other than the permissions.
You know what computer it was accessed from.
Yeah, you have all the binary data you could ever ask for. You just can't, what's in the person's head when they're going in to see it.
But they would have to log in with their, credentials so that
that
way you would know.
When
and then you
was.
ask them what it was for.
Yep.
Right.
It's not what the computer does. It's an
Correct.
audit trail.
Right.
And I think it's worth pointing out.
Watermarks your actions, basically.
Yeah. I think it's worth pointing out that, the fact that there is an audit log around this, you do know who's accessing it is, above and beyond the 22 sensors you're carrying around on your phone. You have no idea who has access to all that stuff right there. So you actually get more transparency, more clarity, more security with everything we're talking about, because we are throwing off data all over the place. We have no idea who's accessing any of that data. Yeah, and this would be the one time you would know who's actually accessing stuff. That being said, I know when I first read about this, and it was, it's 55 cameras, right? So first, or whatever it is. And I know just my first reaction was, man, what are they looking at, right? And so I saw the map and everything. I know I would like, as somebody who's been here for 20 years, who works in data and AI on a daily basis, I would love to see just images from the camera. Like, it needn't be of anybody or anything. Just, hey, here's camera B1, here's what it's taking a picture of, right? You know what I mean? And part of the reason is that's so I know, my concern is simply that I'm being knowingly tracked by somebody. right? But if I can see, hey, you know what, the camera, it's 15 feet up, you know, it's just taking a crowd shot or something, you know, that may remove a lot of the concern. I understand you probably wouldn't want to do this for substation cameras, but I think for, you know, cases we're talking about the public domain, it'd be nice to see just sample images of, you know, what it's looking at.
The only problem with that is that it's not only showing you, but it's showing somebody who does not want to be seen
Understood. Understood.
where to stand.
Understood. And this, I mean, it's a discussion, right?
Mhm.
So.
And also in the public, it's public domain. So if if you step outside, you're being watched. It's
Yeah,
just the way it
in
is.
Illinois, if you say anything in public, it's also, you know, it's also legally a game.
Cameras on your place, you can just look at yourself on your cameras.
Yeah, there you go. We all have their ring cameras. Yeah.
Drive around any street, look at the lights, look at how many cameras are on them.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I had an accident in front of my house once. I called the police department. I said, do you want the footage from my ring camera? I did it, you know, and the reason why is because I saw it and boom, I'm okay.
Any other questions or comments? So I think if you get, you know, in touch with the diversity, get them a draft version, get some feedback. I don't know if there's really anything else we really need.
Oh, to be clear, these are not capturing audio, are they?
Correct. They are video only.
Video only, okay.
That would be illegal in Illinois.
We had her hand up.
Thank you. I would like to see some number of how long we're retaining footage. I mean, whatever we determine what that should be, 30 days, 45 days. Since this is getting reviewed annually, I feel like we can start at a number and then see if it's working or not and then adjust it down the road. But again, as clear as we can be on as many things as we can be, I think is the best way forward, especially as we start this off. I still would love to see something about why people are accessing footage, even if it's in a private government building. I think that if we're doing that to our city employees, to their service also, so that they know why they're, you know, if there's cameras all around a building, who's accessing it and why. And I just think that is, again, just us doing the very best we can by our city employees and our residents.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick note that be careful on the retention time. So it's a huge cost driver. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's what a lot of people do. You know, hey, let's look at what 60 days looks like. We just went from a $20,000 server to $100,000. You know, like it gets ridiculous when you start to have to retain. The retention is where a lot of the cost is. So just keep it in mind when 30 days is very normal.
I'm going to sound really dumb following that up now. I was thinking I'd love for it to line up with the body cam retention period, which I believe is 90 days, right? I think body cam.
So that is the minimum retention for body. We have videos that are retained significantly longer, obviously, for
now hearing
evidentiary
that would
purposes.
be billions and billions of
You gotta think
dollars.
too, their
Yeah, I get
aperture
it.
and-
I get it.
I would argue that
But
when it's captured by a body
what we can figure
camera,
out.
it's during an incident, some type of incident required that camera to go on when that officer had an exchange. So to me, that's a totally different thing than we got a camera on Wilson Street and the bridge.
Possibly. Sometimes things come up after the fact.
Right, but I'm just saying, the reason I think that that's there is that's much more a legal requirement to be able to produce that video.
Hopefully, we're putting in the smarter cameras too, so they only record when they see people or vehicles.
Right.
It's not, they're a lot smarter now than they used to be. So.
Alice?
I just wanted to say that I agreed with Leah and Mark from before. Having heard that discussion that took place, then it made sense to me to have a log as well, whether that's through Excel or whatever, you know, but something that we can just take a look at to see what the reason was. I think that makes sense.
I think that's, to me, that's a reasonable thing to be on there is if you're in there and you're accessing footage from 27 days ago, there needs to be a reason attached to that.
If you're pulling it out.
Right, if you're pulling it out for a reason, or even if you're viewing it. If you're looking for something,
But theoretically,
there should be a reason why.
Well, whatever, I'm not. I don't know.
Or else it'll come back to bite us that an employee is going to say, you were looking at it to try to fire me. You know, that's where.
The only thing I would add to that is that there are times that some employees view information. I'll just, an example, our receptionist has view of the hallway. So if you think she sits right there and she has a view of that hallway between the police and community development, and the reason she has access for that is, heaven forbid, there is an active shooter or something bad goes, and she looks at that all day long. So is she supposed to log that all day long? I guess I just want to have clarity on what that is. The other piece of it as well, like in asking for the reason why the cameras are, obviously based on the policy for anywhere that it's an employee area, as well as a public area, we will have it clearly posted. So it's not a surprise. It's not like someone won't know that a camera is being used. And I think the policy states that the camera is being used for the safety of the employees and or property, as far as safety or security of property. I'm not sure above and beyond, like, I mean, obviously, everyone will be notified. So if there are areas currently right now, but if there's new areas, they will be posted and the employees will be notified as to that, and kind of go from there. And as you can imagine, if a situation comes up, that's when but in general, it's not being monitored for the other reasons of watching someone work or anything along those lines.
Right, and I'll just echo what Wendy's saying with regards to, regular access. We do have staff who are going to have cameras up on a regular basis monitoring things like the booking area or the public safety building, the police lobby, things like that. And it's largely based on safety and situational awareness, things that are important for our police officers to know and have. And so I would encourage them to continue to do that sort of thing, and logging that would be extremely arduous and challenging, I think, to kind of figure that part of that out.
Abby?
He's had his hand up before me.
Chris?
So, yes, this is an audit trail. If you want to find out, you can depose the person. I mean, this is getting way over our skis, way beyond what any us in this regard. Also, we're talking about just minimal areas. You walk into every business where there's a camera pointing on the street, there's cameras. And you know what? How many of those businesses have a sign that say you're being monitored? You don't have to, That's another thing. How many businesses are having audit trails? I'm sure there's business owners on city council who have cameras in their place who don't have any of these real crazy restrictions going on. This is for public safety. You can have an audit trail. I think we're getting just way beyond, I think we're getting a little bit too restrictive here.
I wanted to agree with Alice and Leah. I agree also that the things that are being continuously monitored are not something that needs to be logged, but we're all still reacting. Some of us are just not used to that idea of always being watched outside, and we are just feeling like, how do we minimize the creepiness of this? And minimizing the creepiness for me would be just a little bit more of a paper trail or some accountability to know that that if you're going to go and look at that footage, that you had to have written it down and made a log of why. And if that was ever being abused, there would just be a little bit more information to go back and see why somebody is checking out that camera feed too much and without real need of city business. And I understand it's not the same as all of the private cameras that are out there, but this is being paid for with my tax dollars and my neighbor's tax dollars. So it's more strict. It's going to be more restrictive, and we get more of a say.
I can understand the concern for wanting to have that paper trail. The challenge that we may run into is when we do have some sort of documentation is somebody going to forget it? Is a call going to happen? What then are we going to do? Is somebody that's forgetful to record that? Are we now going to have to start disciplining them? And then also, how is this log going to be kept? Are they going to be able to see who logged before and what they were seeing? And I really do see that as a problem. As somebody that I know that I'm watched, everything I do, everything I look at a law firm, I'm looking at, documentation because I'm trying to educate myself and try to get myself look for information on why this payment went here or there. If anybody ever came to me and said, why were you looking at that? I could provide them with that information. I don't have to log in and check something in and check out. saying, why am I looking at this file? Why am I looking at this client file? Why am I looking at this budget for this client? I know that if there's ever concern, they're going to come to me. It's not something that I have to log in and log out of. So I'm not sure that adding a log is, I just would be very nervous on how that log would be kept and who could see the information of what everybody else is pulling beforehand.
Yeah, and I think more to the point, I mean, if I have nefarious, goals in mind, I could just lie in the log. I'm looking for this case, whatever. I mean, you prove me wrong, right? I know when we talk to clients, what we talk about really, when they ask about security, we always say one of your biggest vulnerabilities is, do the right people have the right permissions, and do the wrong people have too many permissions? Right, so governance is really what we're talking about here. It's not am I gonna write the right log entry in, or who's gonna have control? I mean, I get it, but it's all about governance, right? And governance really that falls into the domain of the police to make sure, because they're the ones, they're the stewards of this, right? So they have to make sure that the users are permissioned correctly, are trained correctly, know the retention policy, know when they can and cannot use this stuff, and then all we can do as a governing body is maybe ask for a quarterly report. Hey, how many times did you guys access the system, right? And stuff like that. I mean, that's a net of it. We are surveillanced 24/7, whether it's through our smartphones, whether it's walking around all over the place. It is unavoidable. It is everywhere, right? And more importantly, this is one of the few times where we have people who have been through a vetting process are now going to be in control of a surveillance system to make sure they're properly permissioned.
I just wanted to respond to that, and tracking with what you're saying. One of the things that we would look at in an annual audit would be, why does someone in the exact same position, if there are 12 of those individuals, why is one accessing the system all the time and the other ones are not? And we sit down with that individual and say, what is it that, what makes you different? So it allows us the opportunity to check things that are anomalies in the system. But I'm just worried that I can see where officers would be accessing the system because they quickly need to know information that will help them and lead them to being able to respond to things that are happening in the moment.
And I don't think that's what I think we're asking those few of us that have talked about having some kind of log or some kind of way to track that. It's just, I want to know that somebody in Public Works that's normally would look at whatever they're doing in Public Works doesn't have access to look at the police files.
They don't, because
Right.
those are the high level, exactly what
Right.
Jim was referring to.
And that's, I think,
And
to
they will
me,
not.
what we really have to make sure that stays separated, that stays, everybody has to stay in their own lane with their own access
Absolutely.
for everything.
And those are the permissions that the administrator of the system puts in there.
It is camera by camera.
Once
Yeah.
it gets
within the
deployed, we
police
should just have you
department,
guys pull it up and show
some
them,
will
'cause
not have
that'll-
access to the cells. Some might not have access to interview rooms. And again, with accessing it, and with anything we do as public employees, there's a reason why we're doing what we're doing. And then if we're asked about it, if Laura's like, hey, why were you doing this? I should have a reason for that. To the extent that an employee, like Laura said, is accessing it outside of work hours, they're doing something that, like, you didn't have any cases in that area. What are you doing? Those things show up in an audit. And so while the system doesn't have a way to be like, I'm accessing it for this reason, and it would necessitate us keeping it outside of that system in some sort of Excel spreadsheet or something, it goes to the assumption that anyone accessing it, downloading footage, using it, should be able to articulate a reason why. And that's to where having that annual audit helps us identify those issues where somebody is misusing it, and that will be dealt with, obviously, promptly and securely.
And I think this is something new for us. It's not something that we've done or gone through before. I don't think we ever even talked about the other cameras that were up before we did this version. And I think it's, a lot of us just, we know that it happens. I joked, we'll leave here and I'll have surveillance footage cameras or something will come up on my feed the next time I go on there. It is absolutely amazing to me that we have an insane amount of technology that we're putting into this. And I just want to make sure that we don't leave ourselves open for anything legally that could harm a police case or something that we need to rectify with an employee or security of the utilities that we own.
I frankly think the opposite will be true, where instead of being caught in a situation of having to surmise who is telling the truth about a situation, we'll actually be able to review the video and see what happened.
And I think that that's the whole goal for this. And I think there are a lot of benefits to it. I think we all just have to get comfortable with that. And that's kind of the reality we're stuck in. Sarah?
And this is new for us, as was stated before. So it's a situation where we can be nimble if we need to, hone in on something that's missing from the draft, which thank you for the collaboration. Thank you for being willing with the ordinance before with Cheryl, for working with her and for working with the diversity coalition too. It's so appreciated. So thank you for being nimble on your end too. But we can amend this as needed. I suppose I see the value in potentially having some kind of record, but then as was stated, we can see who's getting in and have that, and if there is need for investigation. I don't know, it's new. It is.
Alice?
So what I'm hearing is that those of you that are not in favor for the log, you are relying on staff members' memory, right? So I see a problem with that.
It's a log.
No, it's an audit.
Electronically, you could go in and see everybody that's been in it.
But what I mean is the reason you're relying on a
You just have
memory.
to ask them.
Right. Again.
They have to be able to justify why they were in there.
Right. And I get that someone can make up a reason, but I would feel better if there was some type of documentation instead of relying on their memory.
They make up a reason in the log. I think that was
Right.
Jim's
Same
point.
Right. Right.
Make up whatever you
Yeah.
want.
Chance of that happening.
But we make it up. Which is not. And that's not a flippant comment. Like sometimes you got to like if you make someone make something up, then they have to put the effort in, and then the person who's on the fence maybe then doesn't do it. Right. Which, by the way, I think, I'm sorry, I'll let you go. I'll stop.
And the other thing I wanted to say is I'm also hearing that the administrator of that camera is the person that's allowing those permissions. So the administrator could be the person that's in charge of that log. So people in different departments wouldn't be seeing who's logging in and who's viewing this and that, and the reason, it would just be that administrator, correct? If there was a log or something like that, each
Correct, yeah.
administrator could be responsible for
Logs
that.
aren't available to every user of the system.
Right. And so for me, also, I think it'd be interesting to have that data. For the city to spend $350,000, which I think is what we spent on this, I want to see data, as a taxpayer. Why did we spend so much money on the surveillance for cameras that are possibly looking for a problem, right? And I think I heard that in one of the meetings before, that this seems to be a solution looking for a problem. I was not in favor of this. I didn't have a say in that, but I want to see hard data that shows me what my money is going towards, why this was created, why we have this.
Wait, I have a quick question about that. How is an audit log going to give you data about that? I don't understand what you're asking about.
I'm asking for us to document our reasoning for why we're looking up the footage. Obviously not to make it more labor intensive for the individuals that are monitoring the footage on a daily basis, like the hall and what have you. But I think it makes
Clarifying
sense.
question. Are you asking for this then to be reported back to the council for why people were going in to review the data?
I think I heard that on a yearly basis, you guys are reviewing this policy, right? So I think it
Reviewing
makes
the audit.
So I think it makes sense at that time to look at the data and see, okay, well, this is the
And we
reason
have
why.
data. We will have data. We just won't have the logged reason, but if we see that there appears to be some sort of violation of the terms of that policy, then we can investigate that. The other thing we can do, to your point of showing value, is demonstrate use cases to you and how the system has been used to demonstrate its value.
Right, and like one log that we will have is, how many video files did we retain for evidentiary purposes? And we'll have logs of that and the reasons why those video files were pulled and retained, because those are going to be separate. But again, every access or logging every single time that the system is accessed, I think is a slippery slope where we're going to get into an issue of, but we're going to exempt this person who's always monitoring this camera. And now, what about this person who's always monitoring this camera? I understand where you're coming from. I just think that would be a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of worry maybe we're approaching this from a binary standpoint, right? There is a log or there isn't a log, right? But it's sort of multifaceted from what I'm seeing here. First, we have live footage and we have archived footage, right? And so archived footage, that, I don't know, a log might make sense there. Why am I pulling up footage from 4 weeks ago? That should be pretty easy to implement. An Excel sheet might do the trick. I don't know, right? Maybe we can talk about that. Live footage, though, it does seem like that becomes a little bit onerous, right? That feels like when I'm logging in at work, like, oh man, I gotta say the silly thing again that I do every time. And so maybe we can approach this from a larger standpoint that when we grant access, we make the manager who's requesting the access for the subordinate make the case, right? Here's why I want them to have access specifically. I want them for situational awareness in the hallway, to watch the holding area, to ensure that our fleet is not being eaten by squirrels or whatever, right? And maybe by bifurcating these different levels of why we're giving access, that would then give us some of the data we're looking for. It would be nice to know how many squirrels we're seeing chew at the power stations, right? Or how many, folks we're approaching. But I do think there's a way we can kind of thread this needle that isn't, oh man, I have to do this again. This really, is a hard part, dumb thing I have to do for my job every day, but also sort of provide some of the accountability that I think a lot of people are rightfully, if maybe overly worried about, right? And so I guess that's a long-winded way of now turning the challenge kind of maybe back on staff. Are there creative ways, maybe, this is a discussion, maybe you spend some time, go back and think, how can you meet the need that I think I'm hearing from council, that we want to know why people are looking at this, both from a macro and micro level, while making sure that it's not something that's going to cause, because when I hear a log, I hear hours of I hear man hours. I just see man
Taking
hours
us
being
back,
taken
we're
away.
in the age of AI where you take reporting and look at reporting and audit from that. That's what gives you the data, is the reporting, not a log. That's a bad.
Well, a log is, in my mind, a log is
I'd be
you
interested
create a
to
report
find out
from
if
the
the
data.
system can do that.
Yeah.
Guys,
A lot of these are vendor questions.
for those that don't know, who are new on council, this is what I do for a living. I know these systems intimately. I think what will go a long way is if we show the audit that we're talking about. This is not just who logged in and when they logged in and when they logged out. This is where they clicked, what they did, what they downloaded. Did they try to drag another camera that they didn't have access to into the screen? Things like that. It is very detailed. You're going to get, yeah, every click. I don't know this system like I know my system, but they're very similar. And my system will do every click of the mouse. You're going to know what that person did. So you almost need a computer science degree to read the audit, but it's there. The data's there. It can be used in a court of law.
And you'll find out.
Attorneys literally pay tens of thousands of dollars to people who this is their job, is to interpret audit trails. It's ridiculous.
So I think if those who don't know about it, which I totally understand some of the concern, it's there. Once you see it, you're like, okay, like we're going to be able to deduce from this what that person was doing in there, or if they meandered off and was doing something that they didn't. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that it is extremely detailed. It's not just a log in, log out type audit. I like where the heads are going. I just, the practicality of it. And then once everyone sees the audit, it might be enough for everybody. I'm just.
And once you see the audit, you're not going to know unless you pay tens of thousands of dollars to get the people to interpret it.
That makes me more nervous.
Or if
when
you know
say
me.
that, Chris. Like
It's
he
not more
was placating my fear. Now you're making me more
No, it's
afraid.
not. It's not about being more nervous
think
about it.
that what you just said
The point
made
is,
a
it's
lot
so
of. I
complicated.
had my hand up and I got called on.
All right. Well, people have their hands up.
The needing to have a computer science degree to read the audit doesn't inspire the level of transparency that I think you're trying to inspire in that.
I'm being a little facetious.
But
It's all right.
I don't know if the general public will
Scientele
see
will know.
that and say, oh, I feel better about this. Like, I just don't think that will communicate. I think having something more plain language and the reasons laid out in that way, like we were saying, just speaks a little bit more to it. And to the annual nature of it, or to the complexity of the report, or to the, they could make it up then, they could make it up now. There's a little bit of like reactiveness, I think, that if we see some anomalies on an annual basis, that we're reacting to a problem instead of we're trying to prevent problems and hoping that some sort of, having to make it up now would prevent a problem.
Can I ask, how are we envisioning then? So we have these logs, every time somebody has to go into the system, they have to give a reason. So just if we're thinking about like who's maintaining and monitoring and doing that to bring it to whom, where? Like, so are we just asking department supervisors to check this log once a week, once a month, and if they see something that seems suspicious to be able to, or are we just asking these to be a record in case something comes up, in which case it seems like the audit trail would I just kind of want to get granular on this.
I think we got to get some data first and see what we think of how this is set up.
Provide with this?
Wendy, you want to?
Yeah, one thing I would add is the only people that are going to have access, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, to the recorded data is going to be the police department. The only people that will see access to live feeds are, like, for example, the example I used with the receptionist. So the people that are going to be accessing live or recorded feeds is going to be our police officers, our authorized police officers, and or say you, it's not going to be a public works superintendent. It's not going to be even myself. If there's something I need, I will go to the police chief and request that information. And any of those outside requests. So if a superintendent came and said, I want to see what happened on such and such a date, they would have to come to Laura and myself and then ultimately go to the police chief. So accessing that information is not going to be accessed by all employees. I just want to clarify that because we keep talking about this log. And anyone that has live feeds is going to be people that need to see a substation, people who need to see a hallway, but anything recorded that we would look at would be approved and reviewed only by our police department.
If you're asking to log those incidents, I think they will be, relatively few and far between.
Absolutely.
And that would be very manageable because Wendy and I are going to know about each one of those incidents. And we can keep the log rather than have to figure out how 200 people keep a log.
Yeah, and part of this, go ahead.
Leah.
Thank you for your patience. This is a lot of discussion. I mean, everybody around this table. And some of us apparently have more capacity of understanding this than some of us who are newer. So, and to the point, I think Abby said, like, we're just trying to be preventative and, again, do our due diligence to our residents and to our city employees. And so this is why we're here, to have these discussions. This is why we are elected officials. But to Wendy's point, that's the first time that this has come up, that the police department are the only people who will have footage of
Archive.
footage.
I wanted to separate that because I thought that was getting confused.
We have the public works department head or chiefs or whoever, or, people who can see live footage. But as soon as it's done being live, then the only person who can access it is if you contact.
The only people that can and that's in the policy, the only people that can access recorded footage is police personnel.
It's a smart too, is if chief wanted to go in an absolute emergency, Wendy needed to get back, or whoever, right, needed to get back and see something, it's a toggle switch. Boom. Okay, you have access. Okay, they saw it. Okay, boom, now you don't have access. So very flexible in those. It's meant for these guys to be.
Well, I must have missed then where, I'm very sorry, in the draft where it said that because
one of the things that I wanted to say was, I think to me, one of the things that I would hopefully be able to say to the public when they ask why we have all these cameras and all the money spent on it, is so that when Public Works decides, hey, something just blew at the substation on McKee Street, I want to see the footage from 7.5 minutes ago because I want to see what tripped this. Do I have to go to the police department to get approval to see that footage so that I can know what tripped the switch at the substation? I mean, I'm thinking of it as that's a tool for Public Works to have to be able to do their job quicker and better by knowing immediately from video footage what happened.
Well, a substation doesn't necessarily, though, that's not a surveillance, like, that's not a surveillance on,
But it's recorded footage, and I want to know, do they have to go through that to get access? Do they have to wake Laura up at 3:30 in the morning to get access so that they can see what happened?
See, that's when you start getting smart about it and you put in like an AI trigger that, yes, if a person is detected at 3 o'clock in the morning, they'll gain access. If there's no person in the footage, you got to wake Laura up.
So in the policy, it's on page 2 in about 2/3 of the way down. When
Now I'm making
necessary,
work for
authorized city
Seinfeld.
employees may request a recording of specific surveillance footage or images, but only with a specific and articulable purpose. It has to be documented on the public safety video surveillance footage request form and provided to the Human Resources Department. The Human Resources Department will review and approve the request if appropriate, and the footage will be produced by a designated Batavia Police Department member.
So, I mean, if that's the policy, then that's the policy. I just want to make sure that, you know, when we're doing them on Public Works assets, that we know that and that Public Works knows that that's going to be their procedure to find out what occurred, you know, before the power goes off.
Well, employees will be probably educated on the new policy.
Yes.
I just want to point out, there's a gentleman sitting over there in the closet in the dark. And he's running a video, and he runs it every city council meeting, every committee meeting that we have. And this started, when I got elected mayor in 1981, they were just putting cable TV into Batavia. And the idea was, should we broadcast the city council meetings? And the gentleman I defeated as for mayor, he didn't want him in here. And I got elected under the platform that I would support that we put the meetings on the TV. So this has been going on now for 44 years. We've been taping every one of these meetings. Now, I don't know where all the tapes are. They're probably all long gone. I would tell you that in 44 years, there's been probably less than 10 times that somebody's ever called and said, gee, could we go back and see what that alderman did or said or whatever have you? So you're all filmed. You're all being filmed right now. And so it's just there, and it's worked quite well for us. I mean, it's a good record to have. If there's any question about what did Alderman so-and-so say at the meeting or who's debated it, somebody can go in and watch that. So it is available, and they put it on BATV, and you can watch it there. So, I mean, it's the way of the world. I support this very strongly because I think, if nothing else, we got to back these guys up in the police department. And I see this doing a couple things. Number one, we'll put some signs up around town that say, hey, we're taping around here. And so when some of the bad folks from someplace else show up in Batavia and they see that sign, they may have a second thought about, do I want to stay here and try to go in to steal something out of a car or whatever have you. And I just think that's good. But the one that I think I really want to talk to some people about is, I want them downtown here on the main streets, specifically to monitor the bicycle riding, because we've got a problem going in this town with people riding the bicycles, doing all kinds of crazy stuff on them, and they need to know that, hey, now you're probably going to be under being filmed as you do something, so you got to be careful what you do, because you could get caught on the camera and everybody can see what you did. So I think that's going to be a real good aspect to have in Batavia, to keep the bad guys out and keep all the young folks and the old folks, anybody wants to ride a bike or even drive a car too fast, it's all going to be on tape now.
Any other comments? Anything else we need to impart to the chief before we're done with this discussion?
Thanks for sticking through it.
Yeah.
So takeaways are to reach out to VCDI with our current format of the policy and seek their input. Also to add a specific retention period of 30 days. And then also to consider all of this input with regard to logging and come back to you with a proposal for some.
I think the other thing too might just be show us what the system can do now. I mean, because to me, it should be able to log, or at least know who does everything, every keystroke.
Yeah, I think we could see their sample system. I don't know if we want to show the world what all the cameras
No,
are seeing, but I'll just commend this council, the city for, again, I do this with a lot of cities, a lot of companies, but municipalities are huge right now. We're having a much more in-depth conversation than anyone else is having. I'm doing this right now with a large municipality around here that you'd be hard pressed to find somebody in that big town to care 2 ounces about this. They're spending, I don't even want to say the number, but exponentially more than we are. But all that said, all the concerns, right, wrong, or indifferent for those who aren't educated on CCTV systems, things like that, it's all great. It's all good conversation. Good things come out of these when we talk like this. So thanks, Chief, for sticking through it and putting together a good system. And thank you, everybody. Yeah, good work.
I just have a question. With these changes, is this going to delay the use of the cameras? Or is a policy going to be able to move forward because we're just kind of giving input on it?
So our target was to have everything be operational by Windmill City Festival, and I hope then and 4th of July, and I hope that we can still make those target dates even with what we've discussed here tonight.
You should be able to get an ordinance back to us to.
It actually will never come
policy.
back as an ordinance
Oh, it'll
because
be-
the police
it's a policy.
policies are just.
It's a policy,
yeah.
okay. Do we have to approve the police policy? No.
No.
That's why I
Never
asked
have.
that. Are we delaying a policy for this to go active?
No.
Okay. We'll move on to item 12, which is discussion on the city council committees. You
Do
want
you
to
want
start?
me to?
You can start.
Okay, so prior to 2013, the city council had 4 standing committees who also had monthly meetings, and that would be the very first place where items such as resolutions and ordinances were heard, and those groups would give recommendations to city council. And in 2013, there was a discussion about how the members of city council at that time felt that they would have benefited from hearing all of that discussion, but not wanting to go to 4 additional meetings every month. And so they decided to form a committee of the whole. And at the committee of the whole, there were the chairman and vice chairman for the individual committees were responsible for gaining some expertise in that area, being the one to facilitate the discussions on the items on the agenda that were assigned to that committee. But the question comes up now, do you still find value in the committee structure? Would you like to continue with committees? Would be nice for the chairman not to have to read all, 25 items that are on the agenda and kind of pass that torch around to lead discussions. But I don't have a recommendation one way or another. It's really just what you think is for the benefit of decision-making in this group.
I would offer that this system is the best I've ever seen because everybody here gets to hear every discussion, learn about every issue, every debate, everything that's going to happen. And when you go to these individual committees, then you've got, oh gee, I missed the infrastructure committee and I didn't hear that you're going to put a sewer down my street, or I didn't get to hear about where the road was going to go, so I just think it's better that all of you get to sit here twice a month and go through these long committee meetings and understand what's happening, because it really works, I feel.
I'm being the one and only holdover from going back to 7 committees. it is a much better structure to have all the information out with all the members of the council being able to be in the situation where we go through everything. We get to discuss everything. We get to make decisions. We get to change ordinances, bring stuff forward, whatever it might be. But we're all here at that time. Not half of us, not a quarter of us, but all of us are here. And I think that, to me, that makes a lot of sense. So from the structure of it, I think committee of the whole is the way to stay. Now, what we do with the rest of it, that's up for discussion. Sarah?
I was raising my hand because I was going to say we should ask Alderman Wolf what he thinks about this, because he was the one who was here and he beat me to the punch.
Probably the first 2 years I was on the council, I went to every committee meeting. So I went to like 180 meetings a year.
So no, thank you.
To find out what was going on, because I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And I had the time to do it then. So it's insane if you really look at that, what those were like. You would get 6 people that would meet for government services. They would handle the government services stuff. And then you would have 6 people that met for, public utilities. And then you would have 6 people that met for community development. And then you had to figure out of those 18, who was the one you were going to talk to cover the meetings you couldn't get to, which was nuts. So now, having it as one meeting, as committee of the whole, all of that information is there for everybody to have. And it's also, available on YouTube, so you can be traveling anywhere in the world and watch it or be part of it.
Thank you. I think your insight is very valuable. I feel like the system works. And I know, towards the beginning of my tenure here, we had some committee chairs that were still kind of in place, but then we have not gone forward. So open to that. But I feel like this is effective, and I'm glad to hear you agree.
Abby?
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I do feel like I think that there was like a swing, from 1,000 different meetings a month, you go to 1,000 meetings, you only got fractions of discussions, to everything in this room, which I do think is better. I prefer the committee of the whole. I feel like there's a little bit of a swing back that needs to happen in terms of the committee structure, and maybe it's going back to just having the chairs and co-chairs feel like the point people that are going to be more informed or more in communication with staff more regularly, to be more of that expert and to that go-to person, because this is a lot, especially going down. I don't like the 2-a-month cow meetings. I think it was better when we had shorter meetings and more frequent, that we didn't feel so time pressed. It didn't get so late at night. There wasn't so much on the consent agenda. We could dive a little bit more. I just think that we overcorrected, and I think maybe a little bit more of a correction back would be beneficial. I don't necessarily know what that looks like, but I also know that 14 people, this structure of raising your hand, waiting, jumping in and out of order of like, oh, I wanted to respond to that, but I don't want to speak out of turn. So now my counterpoint to your point 4 minutes ago has been lost, because it's just not, this is not always the most effective structure for having these discussions either. Having a smaller group to talk things out with, hash things out, ask questions, especially if you process better in quieter, less like this spaces, is also really helpful. That said, I don't want more meetings. I do want something else, though, that isn't just this, because it was a great analogy. I was talking to Nick Zerone about this before he was off, where just having the committee chairs feel like they were the most informed people in the room, had the most access to the most information in a more timely fashion than the rest of us. He was like, when they do those social studies where you're in a big crowd and somebody has a heart attack and you yell, somebody call 911, and nobody does. But if you say, you call 911, the call gets made a lot more often. And I think there's just something we could do to make this a little bit more productive and feel like we have a little bit more access to information, a little bit better discussions at the table.
One other thought that I had for that was, if we did that and we did keep, committee chairs, you'd be able to, if there was a need for, say, a subcommittee or a need to study one particular issue or to get as much information as we really felt like we were at a loss for information on, then it would be easier to assign that to somebody and also have that person be the one that goes through and reads, those items pertaining to that committee, at a council meeting. Alice?
So my question, I think Abby answered it and you, but I just don't want to ask it. When Laura sent us the email asking us, these are the chairs that are vacant, was that just simply performative then? Like people that were chairs didn't really do anything?
What happened was, I think it was back when Alderman Chanzit left, and that created a vacancy in a vice chair position. And we've had others who have left who also held chair or vice chair positions. And when I asked if we wanted to fill those, the decision was made to wait until the next election and then have a discussion about whether that's working or not working. And if we decide to move forward, then we'd have a discussion after the election and fill all the vacancies.
So did those people actually have a role other than have that title?
I don't know what responsibility they took on
Other than have you reading the
themselves.
consent agenda, no.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're
There
figuring
really
that
wasn't.
out tonight.
I didn't think
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to speak on behalf of them because maybe.
I read stuff.
Jim?
I'll keep it short and sweet, but you're going to laugh. I've actually been watching pretty much every city council meeting for the past 20 years. And it's more, and the reason being is I just want to learn what was going on. I was new to the community, all that good stuff. Then I got elected. And the first thing I was expecting was email traffic. Like people are talking about stuff. They're like, going through stuff. Nothing. Right. And then I had because I think the open meetings actually scared the hell out of everybody. Right?
Yep.
So you're right. I mean, we shouldn't have to come here and just, ask all these questions. So, what I did was I sent Scott all my questions. I said, hey man, before this vote comes, here's all my questions. Right. And I copied the rest of city council, stuff like that. I think we need to do more things like that because we're making it too hard on ourselves. I know I don't know everything walking in the door, right? And I have to learn from staff and learn from people, I'm serving on city council with. But I think what we're acknowledging, there is a lack of pre-work, right? And I think we just need to find a better way to collaborate outside of this meeting, and that'll make these things seem less intense.
One thing you got to remember is Open Meetings Act. No matter what you do, it just
Yeah,
can't
what
be.
you just said makes people nervous.
I know. But
They're like, so when you get here, you'll already have decided.
Right. But it doesn't mean you can't just, like I did with the last issue, right? Scott, here are my questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Copy of city council, get an answer back.
A lot of value in that.
Yeah.
And I blind copied, to make sure that we didn't have the violation of the Open Meetings Act, because that's the one shot that the aldermen get, all the persons get. They get that, and then you can't go back and forth because that's a conversation violation.
You mentioned something that I agree with too, that special committees every once in a while, I think anytime we direct some sort of a study done, for example, like the Brattle Group, maybe there's a subcommittee that's helping walk that process through. Maybe there's a special committee when you permit studies or the giant wastewater treatment plant, like big investments too, to just have a point person, or maybe it is that committee that's in charge of it. I was trying to research other structures on other cities on what they do. Des Plaines, for example, has 8 different committees: building code, community development, community services, engineering, finance, administration, legal and licensing, public safety, and public works. They have 8 alder people. Everyone serves as the chair of one, the co-chair of another, and a member. So every one is 3 people big, which is probably in keeping underneath, I don't know, 3. What? No, yeah, that would be less than
would be
4. So,
Yeah, 5. Would it be 4 or under?
would that be a quorum if you have 8 people? Anyway, I'm not going to do that.
That was one of the other things is when you had smaller committees, when you had, say we had 7 at one point, and, yes, and we had a much smaller number, sometimes it was hard to get a quorum for a meeting. So other members would become members of that committee for the evening.
Right.
And then we could have a meeting.
I just think looking at what our city needs and not being necessarily stuck with the 4 that we have been doing, looking at what we need, looking at what we want to invest our time in, and putting people resources, our resources, our brains behind those goals too.
Ellen, I would like to add,
that structure, because I was here when we did those committees, it delayed projects a ton because you could only get them on one monthly meeting. Here where we have the opportunity, if something gets pushed a little bit, we're only delaying it 2 weeks, not maybe 5. So that's just something to consider.
I had
with
forgot
how many-
about how bad that was and how many special city council meetings we had to get stuff through. Leah?
Got to get my brains back here. One concern I have about smaller committees is just even seeing the discussion that happened earlier in tonight's meeting with approving the variation, on the, with Michelle Lambert, where the Plan Commission had already done a lot of discussion and research and all of that, and we still discussed for an hour. So like, I would think that would just continue to happen, where committees would meet, they'd bring it, and then there would still be the same amount of discussion that would happen at this table. I do agree with Abby, though, as special things come up, like the Brattle Group, or if we're looking at a very specific downtown plan, or just that maybe we can look more into doing specialized committees instead of just standing committees.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because there are times when we did the bridge, we had, I think it was 3 people that were part of the bridge committee, and they literally followed the construction for the entire thing, and they came back and reported to the full council on what was going on, what businesses were having issues, what hangups were going on, what the problems were, and how we could fix things. So it worked good.
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo kind of what's being said here. I really like the committee of the whole format. Like it's really great to get engaged with all the different things, to talk, in depth on our surveillance policy, and talk about, are we going to allow this variance here or not there? I think it's valuable for all of us, because I think that's why we got involved in what we owe our constituents. And I also then agree that it sounds like kind of special task subcommittees make a lot of sense. It makes a whole lot of sense to sort of assign a couple people to really pay close attention and provide feedback. And again, I'm going to agree with Alderperson Lehman on that. It kind of feels like if we had smaller committees, we kind of just argue it twice instead of just once, right? Which wouldn't be great. But all that said, I think still having the committee chairs does seem to have a certain value. If I can walk in, or someone else can walk in and say, well, my job is to make sure I know 7, 12, and 13 on the agenda tonight, and I need to make sure I do my homework on those. I like that division of labor. I like to know what's expected of me, and that seems very valuable. So I'm kind of envisioning still having kind of a chair, vice chair, and maybe that's all the committee is, but then as we need it, kind of creating special subcommittees or whatever. Which, last point I'll make then, maybe we all need to brush up on our Robert's Rules of Order too, right? Maybe we can learn a little bit about how we form committees, subcommittees. I would love to learn a little bit more about Robert's Rules and make sure that we're kind of doing things by the book, as it were.
Yeah, I just want to share that we are looked upon from the region as someplace that seems to be doing it right. And I've had, specifically in the last year, I've had the mayor of Algonquin down here. I've had the mayor of Carpentersville in here. And right now, I've got the mayor of Flossmoor, Illinois, begging me to come over here and tour her around the town. And I get a lot of this from my work in Chicago, but we are regarded as one of the councils that seems to have it together, and that all the aldermen get to know everything that's going to be the big discussions. It's not like some committees off in the corner doing something. Everybody here gets to know it all. We've got an excellent chairman in the mayor pro tem here who's been here a long time, and he knows how it all works. And I will tell you that if suddenly we told you, well, now you're going to have 3 more meetings during the month or whatever have you, you're going to have a second thought about that, we bring you down here now for probably 3-4 hours on committee meetings nights. That's probably going to stay around. But if we suddenly tell you, well, we want you to come down here on Saturday morning, or we want you to come at other times, the council is free to do what they want to do. But I would just suggest to you that some of you are going to have some concerns about how much time you're being asked to come beyond what you're already being asked to do. And I've had these other cities come in here and look at, when I explain it to them, they say, boy, that's the model. That's what I want to go to. So we got people going to us the way we're doing it, then, and trying to learn our ways. So I'm feeling good about that. I think Geneva and St. Charles are kind of in that same breath right now. I've got a meeting on Thursday. I've been asked by some folks from Aurora to come down and share some ideas about how to do things, because they've got some real issues going down in Aurora about who's even there and who's in power, and a bunch of them, much of the staff has left, and they're having to remake the place. And that's another challenge. So we've got a good thing going here, and I hope you don't want to do too much. I mean, I'm certainly open to have you do what you want to do, but right now I think we're on the right track to do things that make this place work, and that's what it's important that we do.
I just wanted to clarify, just in case I gave the wrong impression, I don't want to go back to standing committee meetings either. I don't want to go away from the committee of the whole. I just want, really? Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to, yes, to what Kevin said, put stronger expectations on the chairs and the co-chairs on what their role is here.
And I would be happy too to be able to share some of that and let other people have, you can take 3 items on this week and somebody else gets 2 next week, whatever is, however it balances out on the items that are before us. But that way somebody else can present those, each week. And then, that'll be your responsibility, will be to know what's going on with that when it comes to council or when it comes to the cow meeting. Jen?
I absolutely agree with a lot of what's going on. I would like to echo something that Alderman Beck had mentioned about possibly expanding our cow meetings. And this may not be the time to discuss it, but it might be something to talk about at the retreat. Because I do feel like sometimes we're in marathon sessions, and after probably most of us are working during the day, and then having to come and sit for 3 or 4 hours can be very, very daunting. So I'd like to maybe have a discussion of considering, maybe going to 3 cows a month or something like that.
Another thing we can do is a neighboring community Geneva has 2 meetings per month. What they do is they have their city council meeting and then they begin a cow meeting. So their city council meeting is fairly brief, 30, 35, 40 minutes, and then they have their
I don't
committee
think
of the
that
whole
would work
after
here
that.
because these are already too long and
Oh,
our
I
city
wouldn't
council
say,
goes too long.
I was suggesting
So-
2 more meetings per month, but instead of them being the next day, we would roll right from city council into cow, and the next week we would only have cow.
Right.
And the next week we'd have city council and cow on Monday.
I think we could chew that and then at the retreat have that
Yeah, if we
discussion.
talk about that, because that, even if it just added,
don't wanna
40
put
minutes of
anybody on the spot
cow
to decide.
discussion on 1 or 2 items after our city council meeting, we could shorten the regular cow meetings and be done with.
Have a discussion at
Yeah.
retreat. That's good.
Okay, Alice?
Question, currently, do we have an alderperson that goes to the commission meetings regularly, or do we just go when we can?
Which commissions, like the
Like all of them that we have.
BayTAC and Environmental Commission?
Planning commission, yeah, just zoning? No.
They're open meetings.
They're
so
staff.
we can go to
They
the
are
Staff goes, we
staff
have staff liaison
liaisons.
for the various commissions, so.
And everyone is welcome. Dustin goes to most of them.
Right.
I used to go to all the plan commission meetings too. Then I stepped on somebody's toes and I don't go anymore.
What, it sounds like we do want to continue to have the committee structure within the committee of the whole, having the chairs and vice chairs. There was a suggestion made to looking at different names and responsibility areas for the committees. Would you like to have a future discussion about that? Would you like to then postpone naming chairs and vice chairs tonight and just say this was discussion part 1 and have discussion part 2?
We'll make those decisions on how we want to use the committees.
Okay.
I think that would be good.
Very good.
Okay. Then we can move on to item 13, which is city council retreat.
I was going to ask, should we try to table this item for the next meeting? Because we're at about,
Table just a discussion.
well, or postpone it.
postpone.
Yes,
Yeah.
postpone it
I'm
until the
fine
next
with either.
meeting. Or is time of the essence?
I think we're just trying to nail down a date so that way
Okay.
it's far enough out in advance that we can get, you
Can
know.
we just do a ham raise? Does
Is-
Saturday work for everybody best? That's what we did last time? Or
So
is it-
Max did a doodle poll, and we have the date of September 20th.
Okay.
That looks like it is okay for all of the alder people, but there are 2 staff members who are unable to make that date. So So we have to figure out if that's going to be acceptable to us or not. The other suggestion would be, I just talked about doing the city council with a cow following it, which would free up the entire next Tuesday to have half a retreat, and we could do that a couple of times, and maybe 2 3-hour sessions would be the same amount of time as a retreat. The detraction from that is that you're going to be sitting in the same room where we do everything else. And I felt like moving the venue to Water Street Studios really helped us get a little bit more creative, and it offered a lot more opportunity for interaction. I don't know. There was something about moving to a space like that was inspiring. Yeah, that could be very inspiring at Grainology. But yeah, so there's those 2 aspects of it. I don't know which people prefer.
I'm with you. I like changing the venue. It's,
Okay,
I think September 20th.
then let's try to shoot
plan
for
that out.
September 20th.
I didn't think I put that down as a date I could do.
And I think with as much as the council as we have that's newer, I think it's very important that we focus
do it
as
soon.
much on the council as we do on staff or anything else.
for
Nothing
sure.
against staff.
Nope.
But just, I think we need to, as a council, get to,
It's forming your
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
That's really what it's
Yeah.
all about. Okay.
all right, then we'll move to project status. Laura?
Okay, so under project status, just a few things. There was a mix-up at US Postal Service in mailing the utility survey postcards, but we know that people are getting them now because we suddenly went from, last week having 100 responses to it's only Tuesday morning and we've got over 500 responses. So things are really looking good in that regard. We met with Vicarious Multimedia to finalize the communication plans for the Bring Your Own Bag education campaign, which we are planning to launch next week. This week, you're going to be getting a look at what some of those are going to be in emails from Lori Botterman. She's going to send those out to you and kind of get your feedback on that. Wanted to talk about the meeting next Monday. As you recall, last year, there was a gentleman who asked for a different flag to be raised during the month, and then the city council implemented a flag policy. And according to that policy, the city council has to, or the mayor has to approve a proclamation in order to fly a different flag other than the U.S., state, and local flag. And so perhaps what we should do on Monday, instead of what we used to do is have a little ceremony before the city council meeting, perhaps what we should do is come in, start the meeting, have the proclamation be the first thing that gets approved, and then all of us from in here can move outside to that ceremony. We have invited Reverend Paige Wolfinger of Batavia Congregational Church to give remarks, and then we usually invite all the children who are in attendance to help us to raise the flag. Does that sound like a good way to do it? And in the future, maybe I can get that. Well, it is nice having the proclamation on the same day that we raise the flag, and we'll just have a bigger crowd there, I hope. So that's the way we're planning on doing that. We continue to make progress on the South River Street land use study, and we anticipate that you guys are going to be scheduled in early July to review the project progress. The Tin Shop demolition RFP was published May 23rd and is also available on the city website. And then we sent it out to some interested parties as well. There will be a pre-bid on-site meeting on May 30th, and bids will be due June 13th. And this week, Van Nortwick is closed between Wilson Street and Illinois, and McKee Street between Republic and Western. Detour routes are posted. This is Pulte, who is reconstructing those roads, and also we're replacing utilities in the meantime. They hope to have construction completed prior to the start of the school year in August. The last thing I wanted to mention was we received a couple of requests for solar installations from non-residential entities. And whereas in the past, it has been in our ordinance that only residential customers of the utility are allowed to install solar, because of the situation of our contract for power being more than we actually consume. I thought maybe based on recent discussions that City Council may want to revisit that policy and consider maybe making some adaptations to it. Rahat Bari and Steve Allen are taking a look at our ordinance and will come prepared with statistical information for you, as well as maybe a recommendation of something for you to consider. So that'll be on an upcoming meeting. Unless anybody has any questions.
Any
for me.
questions for Laura?
I have a question. How will our discussion on industrial and commercial solar installation pair up with our infrastructure resiliency work that's going on? Because those appear to go hand in hand. They seem very connected to me.
I think that the recommendations that we make will be for smaller scale users, the commercial and the non-for-profit entities that we have been approached by so far represent an insignificant portion of the city's load. And so I would not anticipate that saying yes to solar for that group would have an impact on the resiliency study, but it's certainly something that we would want Brattle Group to factor in. And so we would seek their advice along the way, let them be in the know that we're having those discussions.
Yeah, the request in question, they deal with, quite frankly, without naming who they are, one of the local churches. They have a time pressure on getting a solar installation installed, just from a pricing perspective. And more importantly, the actual size of the installation, it's firmly in the residential size. So we're not talking about, the request is not to put some massive, solar farm on somebody's roof. It really is, hey, a local church wants to get a residential-esque sized solar panel up before the prices go up. So that's kind of that's one of the drivers for this.
Were you satisfied with that answer? I was switching topics. You good?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Appreciate you checking in.
I was down at the farmer's market this last weekend, packed as always. I know we talked about tables. I just noticed how many groups of people were sitting and eating on curbs. I just think that anything we can do, even for just Saturday mornings, whoever we could loan our tables to, Main Street, people out, other people down on the other end of the Wooner, it would just be great. I think there's demand, there's people that would sit there. And then also with the construction fencing going on there, I think I'd heard it mentioned from staff putting up a rendering of what it's going to look like on the
Working on
fencing.
that.
Okay, awesome. I think that'll go a long way to answering a lot of questions that I heard.
you.
I was down there too and saw the amount of people that were at the tables that were there up above by Tusk. And so anything we can logistically figure out how to put out there and leave in a place where it doesn't have to be moved. So that way, when the street goes back open, it's out of the way. It'll get used.
Right.
And then we just have to figure out how Main Street and the businesses can help us make sure they stay clean. And that's really the only.
Well, I want to give a shout out to Mary Claire Harris, who has agreed that we can put tables in front of 21 North River Street and 25 North River Street, that she owns both.
Second question I have about farmers market. I know I saw again liquor sales out in front of a business down there. do they have a special license for that? Is that legal? Is that problematic? Or are we just gonna, as in the past it's happened? I just want to make sure that there's not.
What is supposed to happen is that they serve drinks to people from an establishment that has a liquor license. So to the.
They do.
They can't, okay.
I just want to make sure that, it's just not getting handed out and people are walking away and, it could be a problem.
One of the requirements, there were sandwich boards that I think they didn't have the first week, but they did have the second week.
I just want to make sure it's
Yeah,
what
that-
we're requiring
that we're
gets done.
saying no alcohol beyond this point, and you can't bring your own alcohol.
And I don't think we've really ever had a problem with it
No.
migrating out of the area or anything else. I think people have been pretty good about it.
Not to
I just want to
my
make sure that they're following the rules we tell them to.
I think all of them know that if they get themselves into trouble, they're in trouble and it's their license that's at
Yeah.
risk here, or they're
You'd hope
going to
they
get,
wouldn't risk it for selling.
they're going to
a
get the
Bloody
fine or
Mary
whatever it's going to
Right,
be.
and I just want to
Farmer's
make sure that
market.
it's all what it should be.
Legit.
Yep. Okay, Jen?
Just a comment. I was at another community yesterday. They've actually closed off a street for their restaurants and, they have a big tent, which wouldn't work here. And the businesses do contribute to that. But the thing that really stood out to me was they had to close off their street. And instead of having the construction barriers, they had like plastic construction barriers that are filled with water. And there was a green one and a white one, and they looked really nice as opposed to the normal thing. So I don't know if we ever run into this in the future, but, maybe consider something like that so it's not the concrete barriers that everybody thinks.
Right, was there a state route involved with that particular road closure?
Probably
Because
not.
those are the things that we run into is we have to ask Mother May I from IDOT, and they.
But we may have other streets in the community at some point down the road that we might need to close, that we have that jurisdiction to. So just something to keep in mind. It was quite surprising and I couldn't move it.
Okay. I need a motion to go into executive session for the purchase of real estate.
Moved.
Second. Motion by Bolsinger, second by Malone. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're going to an executive session. We'll take a 2-minute